Saal Cooper was the strongest shadow in his clan, a title given to those entrusted with performing dirty work, murder, arson, espionage, and much more. So all the clan's dark deeds were done by his hands. Having devoted himself to the family, he was ultimately betrayed and humiliated even by his enemies. In the end, the clan leader declared that Saal, remaining a shadow, had betrayed his family for his own petty interests and sentenced him to immediate execution. These words were the signal, and the guy was pierced by thousands of swords. The mentor he totally trusted turned out to be a traitor. Before leaving, Alan just smiled slyly and announced that he would reveal the secret on the day when Saal became a shadow. A spell of shadows was cast on him. With the help of this sinister technique, his strength was sucked out like food, and all the blows intended for the chief were absorbed by his shadow. However, Saal was not going to accept his fate, and decided that he would take his enemy with him at the last moment. But even his desperate desire for revenge was not fulfilled, and he died dishonored. And yet, despite everything, fate gave him a chance at rebirth. When the hero realized that he had returned to life, his hatred for his enemy flared up with renewed vigor. At the age of 3, Saal swore that in this life he would not repeat the rash mistakes that had cost him everything in the past. Moving along the path of revenge, he mercilessly killed the minions of darkness who stood in his way. He fought bloodthirsty monsters eager to tear his small body apart and devour him. In his new incarnation, he collected familiar artifacts so that one day he could make Alan Cooper his shadow. Such was his journey from a bastard despised by his family and hated by everyone around him, to someone who inspired terror and became the strongest swordsman on the entire continent. And all this for the sole purpose of revenge, to repay an eye for an eye, to finally get closer to punishing his offender. Recalling past events, Saal returned home after defeating the enemy clan, remaining the most loyal shadow of his clan. But he was not greeted as a hero. The chief accused him of treason and ordered his execution. Hearing the accusation, Saal was on the verge of madness, and it seemed that with a glance he could destroy everyone around him. Even wounded and exhausted after the recent battle, Saal rushed forward to take his revenge and destroy his enemy. But alas, his sword stopped just a step away from his offender's neck, never completing his plan. He simply did not have the strength to do so. He was suddenly stabbed in the back with a sword, and Saal wondered if this was really the end. In his final seconds, he looked at his enemy and swore to take revenge at any cost. He promised that if the afterlife existed, his enemies would be destroyed and sent there piece by piece. With these words, blood gushed profusely from his wounds, and sinking into darkness, he died. When Saal opened his eyes, he found himself in a new body but in a familiar place. Remembering the skills of his past life, he instantly stood up, sensing the presence of a dangerous person nearby. The first thought that came to mind was that he might be in hell, but the place looked somehow different, even familiar. While he was thinking about this, a large woman entered the room and rudely told him to wash up because someone would be coming for him soon. Saal just glared at her, as if ready to kill her with his own hands. The woman didn't like his look, so she hit him hard and contemptuously called him a little bastard. The blow was powerful enough to knock Saal to the ground. He looked at her in surprise and, hearing the words, "little bastard," glanced in the mirror, where everything became clear. Realizing what was happening, Saal smiled happily, understanding what it meant for him. He seemed to be back in his own body at the age of 3. Now he was truly reborn, and would be able to carry out his revenge. Remembering his past life, Saal knew how he had become a shadow of the Cooper family, undergoing brutal training and torture since childhood. He and other shadows like him were tasked with bloody murders, arson, and espionage, promised fame and recognition as a reward. Being a bastard, Saal was ready to accept this, wanting to change his fate and earn the respect of his family. He trained hard to compensate for his lack of natural talent. Even when his family did not appreciate him, he voluntarily went to war against other clans. Saal fought, killing enemies and destroying cities, carrying out orders. After going through unimaginably brutal battles, he defeated his enemies, thinking he would be welcomed as a hero. But he was sorely mistaken. He was met with betrayal, and the truth about the shadows was revealed to him. Alan said that he had cast a spell of shadows on everyone. Thanks to this spell, their power was transferred to him, and their wounds became his protection. As for the glory and riches promised to the shadows, it was a lie to keep them submissive like chained dogs. Realizing that his life had been a deception, Saal sank into despair and rushed furiously into battle. In his rage, he delivered the final blow, striking his opponent's shoulder. A moment later, due to the oath imposed on him, Alan's wound disappeared. All the damage the man had suffered a few moments earlier returned to the main character. Although he understood the principle of blood magic and was able to use the reverse oath of shadows to regain all the power that Alan had taken from him, he could not escape death. Therefore, after being reborn, he swore to himself that he would not make the same mistakes in this life. A few moments later, his stomach growled, and he realized he was hungry, as if he hadn't eaten in 3 days. At that moment, he heard a mouse squeak in the corner, and the boy immediately turned his attention there. He looked at the mouse with a bloodthirsty expression, thinking that he would eat it first to satisfy his hunger, because in his previous life, it was considered a delicacy on the battlefield. But as soon as he was about to do so, several men entered the room and called him trash. They said that Master Alan wanted to see him, and without delay began to drag him away. Saal realized that in his past life, it was at this age that he was chosen as a shadow. but his memories of the ceremony had completely disappeared. He assumed that his enemy had poisoned him with his blood magic, but now everything was different, and he smiled slyly. Then he sank his teeth into the arm of the man who was dragging him and bit it almost to the point of drawing blood. People shouted that this kid had latched onto them like a dog and told them to grab him. One of them swung his arm to hit the little rascal. But, acting on instinct, the hero noticed the attack, dodged it, and reached for the man's weapon. He managed to pull the sword out of its sheath and easily cut off the attacker's arm. The remaining man was horrified by what he saw and thought that the boy probably knew how to use a sword. At that moment, Saal was already thirsty for blood, and smiling, thought that he had finally gotten his chance for revenge. The Shadow Oath is an ancient blood magic spell that allows you to make the target of the spell your shadow by paying a couple of drops of blood. At the same time, the shadow cannot harm its master. On the contrary, it takes damage for him, and the master takes all the power and abilities accumulated by the shadow. This spell was so cruel that more than 100 years ago, the Empire issued a law requiring the destruction of all books in which it was mentioned. It also introduced a complete ban on its use shortly thereafter. Alan scolded his subordinate. He said that he was a nobody, and not worthy of being called part of their family if some dog could defeat him so easily. The servant apologized, and the boy approached the main character and asked how he dared to oppose his master's people. Saal did not respond to these words, but simply looked away from the speaker. The young gentleman approached him and, smiling a crazy smile, ordered his subordinates to throw him into a dungeon to rot there. The servants immediately agreed, but suddenly a woman appeared and asked Alan to wait a moment. She explained that such behavior was natural for the boy, since he had grown up as a street child. It was Hera Cooper, the head of the family and Alan's mother. She went on to say that now was not the time for punishment, because the initiation ceremony was more important, and her son should not forget her words. Then his mother approached the young gentleman and asked him what they were going to do today, which stunned him. The son was greatly surprised and thought that he did not understand why his mother had chosen this insignificant bastard and his shadow. In any case, if the opportunity arose, he would have to kill him. But now, with a sly smile, he told his mother that he supported her plan. Hera also smiled, reminding him that he was the future head of the family, and said that she would send everyone out, leaving them alone. She ordered her subordinates to clear the room and leave Master Alan alone, asking him to cast a spell to muffle the sound so that no one could interfere. Naturally, the servants immediately agreed, hurriedly left the room, and the boy poured the liquid into a glass. Then he raised his glass high and proudly announced that from that moment on, they would all become soldiers in his shadow army and swear allegiance to their family. The children immediately began to swear, promising to devote themselves body and soul to the head of the family and give everything they had. Saal stood silently to one side, staring at the glass he held in his hand. A moment later, he turned the glass upside down and drank its contents to the bottom. At that moment, the glass fell to the ground, and with it, all the other children, including the main character, collapsed. The young gentleman approached his followers with a knife in his hands and said with a smirk that this whole crowd of fools couldn't even tell poison from holy water. Then he cut his finger until it bled and dripped a few drops of blood right where the children were lying. Immediately after that, a magic circle appeared, and the boy solemnly announced that from now on, their power and abilities belonged only to him, and they would take on all his wounds. The spell spread around like a shadow, engulfing the space. The children, including the main character, were also affected by it. Alan felt the power filling him, and was convinced that the Oath of the Shadow had worked. He had no idea that everything would turn out to be so simple, considering himself a true genius, and decided that he needed to please his mother with good news. He immediately turned toward the exit and began to address the woman. But as soon as he took a step, he felt a sharp pain in his leg. He fell, not understanding what was happening and why his legs refused to obey him. It was strange. Could this be a side effect of the Shadow Oath? But his mother had never warned him about this, which seemed suspicious. In a panic, tears welled up in his eyes, and he called plaintively for his mother. At that moment, Saal got to his feet and coldly remarked that he was looking at nothing more than a pathetic coward who was used to hiding behind his mother's skirt. But the irony was that his mother had cast a soundproof spell so that no one would disturb them, and no matter how loudly Alan screamed, no one would hear him. The boy turned around and noticed Richard in the corner, staring at him with hatred, a weapon in his hands. Terrified, Alan asked how Saal had woken up and how he knew about the oath, but Saal only asked coldly if he was afraid and added that he knew much more. Then he added that if he could break the oath, what would Alan do? After these words, Saal clenched the weapon and thrust it into Alan with fury. The pain was unbearable. His heart felt like it was being torn from his chest. He didn't understand why this was happening and begged Saal to stop. But Richard only reminded him that in his past life, he had to die to get back what Alan had taken from him. This time, he wasn't going to give up so easily. Pointing the weapon at Alan, he declared that it was simply an eye for an eye. Suddenly, a loud noise came from behind the door, attracting the attention of the others. The subordinates informed the lady that the protective spell had been broken, and she became alarmed for her son. In the darkness of the night, one of her subordinates assured her that the young master was fine, having simply exhausted his strength using a powerful spell. Speaking of the destruction of the protective barrier, he added that one of the servants had been distracted during the spell and had been killed. The woman looked at him coldly and calmly ordered that his body be fed to the dogs. The man bowed and remarked that the young master looked a little agitated, but that was natural, as he was still too young for such things. This tension affected him. Alan was confused and felt that something important had happened, but he couldn't understand what exactly. His thoughts were interrupted by his mother gently placing her hand on his head. She warmly told him that he shouldn't worry about the shadows, because they were just the laws of the jungle, and he would become stronger. But before Hera could finish, the boy suddenly pushed her hand away. His eyes were filled with madness, as he confidently declared that he was the future head of the Cooper family, and that every little creature was obliged to sacrifice their lives for him. Then he turned to his mother and asked if his thoughts were correct, to which she replied with a satisfied smile that her son understood everything correctly. If he needs anything, let him say so, and she will do everything for him. The boy gratefully declared that he could not find a better mother. Nearby, the main character watched this family idyll, muttering quietly with a smile, "What a lovely couple." But his own gaze was no less insane, for now Alan Cooper was his shadow. In his past life, Saal, in his battles for his family, had found a tome of blood magic containing another oath of shadows. Of course, he brought it to the head of the family, but even then, her shadow had already taken hold of him. Fortunately, he managed to study the text of the book, and combine the knowledge he gained with the experience of regaining his power from his past life. Now all he needs to break the oath is a drop of blood, and that will change everything between him and Alan. However, he is only 3 years old and still too weak to stand up to them. Now he needs to become stronger. He takes the first step on the path to great power. He chooses the Flaming Mountain, a training ground created by the Cooper family to test shadows and select the strongest. The children faced harsh trials there, similar to the torments of Prometheus. Every day, their bodies were torn apart by eagles' claws. The Cooper family sent young children to this mountain so that they could overcome the thorny path with eagles tearing at their flesh. Even death was not a reason to retreat. Only the first shadow to reach the summit would receive the blessing of the eagle griffin. Those who survive this trial will gain a body invulnerable to any torture or wound. The instructor, addressing the children, made it clear that they had only 3 days to reach the summit. The methods were not important. His name was Enos Walker, and he was the mentor of the shadows. He also reminded them that anyone who gave up would be executed on the 3rd day. After that, Enos brought the whistle to his mouth, adding that all this was for the glorious future of the shadows. The whistle was followed by a signal announcing the start of the trial. The children around him froze in fear, and no one dared to move, but the coach suddenly noticed one of them. It was the main character, who was walking with a confident, slow gait. The coach smiled, noticing his self-confidence. One of his subordinates clarified that this was Saal Cooper, the bastard who had enraged the young master yesterday, to which the man replied that now everything was clear to him. Very soon, the main character approached a huge rock and began to calmly climb it with his bare hands. The instructor couldn't hold back his laughter, predicting that the boy would fall before even reaching the middle. One of the spectators said that since he was so stubborn, they might as well go to him right away to pick up his body. But Enos replied with a sly smile that he had a better idea, because now was the time, and he had to appear. And indeed, soon frightened children's voices were heard asking what it was. Horror filled their hearts when they saw the bloody silhouettes of terrifying creatures in the sky, and in a panic, the children began to scream that it was a monster. Saal continued his way up and decided to find out what exactly had attracted the children's attention. A moment later, he noticed a griffin devouring the children to get rid of them. Only the main character remained alive, and it was him that the creature noticed with interest. Enos reached for his bow and noticed that yesterday the boy had angered Master Alan, so why not use the griffin to get rid of him? After that, let the young gentleman enjoy the situation a little. The arrow was shot at the griffin, but it easily dodged it. Then the griffin turned its attention to the main character and asked with interest who dared to do this. Without hesitation, it rushed into the attack, declaring that this fool must die, but the hero thought he could say the same about it. Then he jumped up, trying to dodge, knowing that he had already been through this once. Because there is only one way to get the griffin's blessing as quickly as possible: to tame it. This creature was a high-level monster with a danger rating of 4 stars, born on a fiery mountain, and it had a female floor. According to rumors, it developed psychic abilities to communicate with humans after devouring many human brains. In addition, this creature was allied with the Cooper family, a stubborn griffin with human-like intelligence. If the hero could not completely defeat it, he would not be able to tame it. He understood that this meant he had to give it his all. Therefore, without stopping for a second, he rushed from side to side to attack the creature. The griffin did not stand aside either, and tried to fight back with the magic it had accumulated in its mouth. After the spell was cast, a storm arose that knocked the young boy off his feet. After he flew to the ground, he began to fall headfirst down the slope. Fortunately for Saal, he managed to grab onto a ledge, but he was too reckless, and now he was 3 years old, not 30. Even his sword skills from his past life did not help him in this situation, because with his current size, the griffin could crush him before he could get close. The boy knew there was another way to get rid of it. He just had to get to the cave on the mountain. While he was thinking, the griffin did not intend to resume its attack and created a huge magic ball. A few seconds later, it launched its attack, and it struck right at the boy's feet. Saal understood that this was powerful wind magic. Every time the griffin released gusts of wind from its mouth, it increased its power from 1 to 10. Therefore, even if 100 like him gathered here, it would not be enough. Only at that moment did the hero remember something else. Turning in the other direction, he jumped and found himself right in front of the cave. He thought that since he couldn't dodge its attacks, why not use its power to get to the cave? With his weapon, the boy blocked her attack, and the shockwave threw him straight into the cave. He decided that in order to minimize damage, he would immediately use the power of the Oath of Shadows to take away Alan's power. Young Alan, who was sitting calmly at his desk, suddenly collapsed to the floor, and his subordinate, puzzled, asked what had happened to him, since he had lost consciousness. Using his strength, the hero reached the cave and realized that everything had turned out as planned. But he couldn't relax and he had to hurry. The griffin understood perfectly well where this man was headed, and immediately set off in pursuit. Then she shouted at the little fool, asking where he was running so fast. A moment later, her fervor subsided and she stopped, asking what was going on. The boy grabbed the griffin cub and held it hostage, so it begged to be saved, and the hero said that few people knew that the cub of such a creature was born with broken wings. The griffin indignantly asked what he was going to do with her baby, to which Saal replied that he did not want to harm it. On the contrary, he wanted to help and heal its wings so that it could fly. His companion was stunned to hear this news, but the boy slyly remarked that he had one condition. After a while, she said that they should go, because they needed to tell Mr. Allen about this, and they would surely be resurrected. Behind them, the main character's voice rang out, saying that he could then give them a lift to him. The men realized that Saal Cooper was definitely alive, and the boy said that he would have to disappoint them and send them straight to hell, where they would wait for him. The guards were completely baffled, and running away from the monster, said that such a thing was simply impossible. However, these people had no chance of escape, and the bloodthirsty monster tore their bodies apart, after which the griffin declared that she had fulfilled her part of the bargain, and now it was the boy's turn. Saal suggested that she take him to the dungeon in the northernmost part of the mountain range. The conversation was about the Land of Stones, which they soon arrived at, and the creature stated that, as agreed, he would receive Perseus's sword. Now he needed to obtain jellyfish blood for it, which could heal any wound, and the hero smiled and said that this would not be a problem. Saal thought that it was a pity, of course, that his real goal was not the sword at all, and certainly not helping the griffin. The creature swung open the door ahead with its enormous limb, and the hero pondered how to use the griffin to destroy this dungeon. Behind the door was a fairly large room with a stone statue of a jellyfish in the center. There were other statues inside, which the boy and the griffin saw when they entered. In a past life, when Alan turned 12, his mother sent an entire army of shadows to obtain the sword of Perseus for him. However, in this dungeon there was a statue of Medusa, capable of turning all living things to stone. As a result, many shadows, similar to the main character, fell in battle protecting Alan from it, and only Saal remained alive. Nevertheless, Perseus' sword could only belong to geniuses of level S, and the hero was unable to lift it. Alan, being a gifted young man, easily took the sword and defeated the Medusa. Then the boy became the chosen one and received countless resources, a good reputation, and many loyal servants for this. Saal said that although he understood that he couldn't get the weapon himself, he couldn't let Alan get it either. Soon, the griffin asked where the sword and jellyfish blood were, and why there was only a pile of stones around them. Suddenly, they heard the stone door through which they had entered slam shut. The monster panicked and shouted at the boy, asking if this was his clever trick. But the boy pointed with a surprised and wary look, saying that something was moving behind them. The griffin instantly turned around and noticed the statues beginning to stir, preparing to attack. The creature had no choice but to rush into battle, and it exclaimed that these stupid stones had come to life. Trying to save himself, the hero claimed he didn't know when it happened. The griffin continued to fight, smashing stone statues to dust. The fragments of the destroyed monsters began to gather together, and the boy asked in amazement if they could change their shape and unite. These creatures were ruthless and cruel, faceless, as if the three Grey-Eye sisters shared one tooth and one eye. Griffin noted that, like Medusa, they were daughters of the god of the sea, so they could control the water element. So the hero shouted that they had to run, but the creature asked what was the point if they needed to find the sword. The main character, in a panic, continued to run away, claiming that it was him they were looking for. The woman remarked that if this continued, the ceiling would collapse and they would perish here. Saal added that he was indeed looking for it, and that there were runes on the wall that might point to the solution. Despite his anxiety, the guy thought it was just a remarkable situation. The dungeon was about to collapse and bury them under a pile of stones. But he would quickly find the secret passage he had found in his past life, only he didn't have enough strength yet. The hero pointed upward and said that the runes say, "Get rid of the eye on the ceiling, then the attacks will stop." After that, the monster asked what other eye was on the ceiling and looked up. When she saw that there really was an eye there, she immediately rushed to attack it. She declared that she would remove it immediately, and quickly flew up, grabbing it in her beak. The water monster, which had been attacking all along, immediately froze and began to scream loudly. The creature's body began to melt like ice, turning into ordinary water. The griffin stopped and said admiringly that they had indeed turned into water, which was incredible. The hero added that according to the runes, Perseus learned of Medusa's whereabouts after stealing the Grey's eyes, so the eyes were their weakness. The monster asked the boy where the promised items were that could heal her child, because this eye would probably be able to help. Saal replied that if he was talking about the sword, It was over there, and pointed in that direction. Griffin looked and indeed saw the sword glinting in the darkness. When Perseus cut off the Medusa's head with this sword, red and green blood flowed from it. The red blood could poison any living creature, and the green blood had the power to heal any wound. But this is just a myth, and this dungeon holds another mystery. The Griffin asked what he meant, and the boy replied that when Perseus's sword reappeared within these walls, Medusa would be resurrected. And so it happened. The Griffin watched in horror as Medusa came back to life and began to attack. Her long hair, transformed into snakes, began to attack everything around her with fury. The main character thought with a smirk that it was probably time for him to get out of there. There was only one way to wake the Medusa statue, to cut off her head with Perseus's sword. When the boy tried to leave the mysterious portal, he was suddenly overcome by a wave of danger. But relying on his instincts and skills from his past life, he dodged it with ease. Saal instantly took up a fighting stance and focused his gaze on the jellyfish. At the same time, he couldn't understand what was happening and where the Griffin was hiding. The Griffin, hiding behind a rock, whispered that this creature looked even more terrifying than the previous one, and that now she didn't want to die. The main character was shocked and wondered if his Griffin could shrink. But his thoughts were interrupted by the Griffin, which rushed into attack, and Saal remembered how he had already passed through this dungeon in his past life, and knew what to do. First of all, he needed to get the shield of the Knights of the Round Table, which was nearby. Thanks to the reflective power of this shield, he would be able to avoid the jellyfish's direct gaze. Moreover, this weapon can withstand a deadly attack from her eyes. The boy just managed to grab the shield when the jellyfish lunged at him again. Its deadly beam was so powerful that Saal had difficulty staying on his feet. A moment later, unable to withstand the force of the blow, he flew sideways, blood gushing from his mouth. Struggling to his feet, Saal realized that the situation was becoming critical, and that one shield was not enough to save him. It was also clear that she had destroyed the exit from the dungeon through which he had intended to escape. The boy was physically unable to take Perseus's sword, although perhaps that was not entirely true. He couldn't know for sure unless he tried, and he had to take the risk, otherwise he would simply perish. Even if he had to risk his life, he still had to do it. A few moments later, he ran up to the weapon and picked it up, surprised to find that he had simply picked up a sword. But his thoughts were interrupted by Medusa, who pierced his body with her snake. The stone creature lifted him up, and the boy wondered why this was happening, because he was not gifted from birth, and how he managed to lift the sword remained a mystery. Something was clearly wrong, because in his past life, Alan had mocked him and not allowed him to touch weapons because of his low level. When the hero was nailed to the cross, his mother and son discussed whether he would find out that they had taken away his natural talent, and decided that amnesia would solve the problem. Now the hero understood what was going on. Alan's fencing talent had been transferred to him. After a moment's hesitation, Saal immediately used his power, and his body gradually began to heal. Griffin was very puzzled when he saw what had happened. But it turned out that the boy standing in front of her remained unharmed after her attack. In her eyes, he seemed like a real monster that couldn't be killed just like that. The boy used his weapon and easily cut off the jellyfish's head. As already mentioned, several types of blood flowed from the creature's body, red and blue, and the hero collected the blue, thinking that in his past life his fencing level was S. But Alan's mother used magic to steal his talent and transfer it to her son, then erased his memory. That was the truth. When the main character realized all this, he began to laugh loudly, and Griffin, sitting nearby, did not understand what was happening to this guy. Saal smiled madly, thinking that the situation was getting more and more interesting, and that Alan's whole family was just waiting for him. The creature that had turned into a dwarf thought that no matter what happened, as long as this man was going crazy, it would be better to leave as soon as possible. When she actually decided to leave, the boy noticed and shouted, urging her to come to him. The monster stopped and asked why she was being called, thinking that she was a high-level creature, so why were they afraid of her? Saal asked if her head was strong, to which his interlocutor asked in surprise what he meant. Shortly after this conversation, the creature transformed into a huge being and flew out of the cave, breaking through the passage with its head. She thought that this man had used her from the very beginning to destroy the dungeon, but since he agreed to heal her cub, she would forgive him. Dark and green energy began to seep out from under the ruins of the cave. In the place where part of the jellyfish's head had been, the energy flowed toward the rune located in this cave. When enough power had accumulated, the creature's eyes opened. Soon, the Griffin and Saal Cooper found themselves on a mountain, and she said that as a Griffin, she blessed him. She also gave him an indestructible body, and no matter how many times he was struck, he would remain unharmed. The boy immediately felt that he had become much more resilient. Even minor wounds heal on their own, which significantly minimizes the amount of damage transferred to Alan, and his mother won't suspect anything suspicious. In addition, he needs to hide the fact that he has an S-level talent so as not to attract unnecessary attention. Saal asked the Griffin to help heal his cub, and its wings began to recover. The creature immediately responded and began to care for her chick. After a few moments, the power of the jellyfish's blood really started to heal the little creature's wings. Thanks to this, it was filled with strength and vigor, and immediately soared into the sky. Its mother happily noticed that it was finally able to fly away. The hero said that he had only just begun to learn to fly. If he did not find a master before coming of age, he would remain nothing more than a bird with a magnifying glass. His companion asked what he was talking about. The hero replied that it was nothing special. He just wanted to warn her, because she had become strong after finding her master. The griffin thought that this was true. If it weren't for her master, she would not have been able to develop her soul and become stronger. But that man had died more than 100 years ago, and she needed someone just as strong. But it was unclear where to find someone who could kill others without batting an eye. Suddenly, she realized that the answer was obvious. After that, she approached the young boy and formally addressed him. She asked him to take her cub as his magical pet, believing that at such a young age he was much stronger and smarter than his peers. Therefore, there was a possibility that in the future he would be able to surpass even Brad. The boy smiled slyly, thinking that she had fallen for it. At the same time, he said he agreed and would take him, but only if they made a deal, because he wanted to know everything about Brad Cooper. He was also interested in the location of the precious key that opened the door to Brad's spiritual sword. Night fell, and Hera asked what it meant, why no one could understand what was happening. Alan fainted twice on level ground, and it couldn't have happened just like that. I wonder how long this can go on. The old man asked her not to worry, explaining that thanks to the good price, the young gentleman would quickly recover. After all, any damage would be taken by the little shadows. The head thought that everything was correct. Something strange was happening. It seemed that Alan had become like this after the ceremony with the shadows, and someone was clearly behind it. The subordinate added that something unexpected had happened that required her attention. Saal Cooper had taken first place on the test exam, as expected. However, this boy used the griffin to kill Uncle Walker and his nephew, and then tamed its cub. The woman was greatly surprised. Dropping her cup, she immediately asked where it was, and the man replied that it was right outside the door, and he would call it now. Soon, the boy slowly walked into the room. With a relaxed smile, he looked at the head of the family and asked what she wanted. The first thing the woman said was, "Why did he kill the walkers?" And the hero asked, "Why?" The conversation became frantic, and Saal declared that he had done it for the family. It was a pity that the shadow coach was so bad that a simple 3-year-old child and their family didn't need such trash. The boy asked the lady if he'd done something wrong to this man, and she was so surprised that she couldn't say a word. Hera saw the expression on the child's face and realized that it was anger mixed with disgust. But now he showed no fear, and it seemed he had some kind of trump card up his sleeve. With a sweet smile, she asked Doug to give Saal a reward and send him to the Eden Springs for treatment. Saal bowed and expressed his gratitude for her kindness, thinking that this place would probably become indispensable to him. Shortly after leaving the head's room, he heard her order a subordinate to speed up the study of methods of magic deprivation, because they urgently needed to take away Saal's talent. She planned to pass this talent on to her son before the ceremony of inheriting Brad's sword, fearing that if the secret of her son's lack of innate talent was revealed, they might lose their inheritance. Saal Cooper is a real scoundrel, and as long as she lets him go, they will soon see how far he can go with his arrogance. In just a few moments, the hero headed for the sources of Eden, where he was sent. Walking slowly through the building, he recalled the words of the Griffin, who said that before his death, Master Brad had used forbidden magic. He sealed his soul in the springs of Eden to pass on his knowledge and fencing skills to an heir with S-level talent. All this was done so that the Cooper family's status in the Empire would not be shaken after his death. When the boy found himself at the bottom, let the stream lead him to the underwater cave. There lies the key that will show the master the way. But now something strange is happening in the springs due to the long separation from him, and she does not understand what exactly. She could only say that the gentleman possessed blood magic, and that it would not be easy for him. The hero thought it strange how he would obtain the sword before Alan. The children began to whisper. This was the same Saal Cooper who had passed the qualifying exam. Someone noted that he had not only done that, but had also tamed a griffin cub. Lucien Sia, Reno's little servant, asked with a sly smile what was so cool about him, since he was the son of an ungodly woman. Standing nearby was Reno Ors, the son of the Cooper family's stableman. This so-called aristocrat approached the hero and sarcastically congratulated him, noting that he not only looked like a skinny monkey, but also moved like one. Saal remembered that in his past life they had been his subordinates, sent by Alan. They were the ones who had fabricated the charges, after which he was declared a traitor to his country. These guys from the hall were used to power. Reno wondered why he was silent and decided to see if his indestructible body would help. At that moment, the boy swung his arm at the hero, who instantly noticed the attack. But he did not flinch for a second. Raising his hand, he deftly grabbed his opponent's arm. At the same time, he said that if the boy really wanted to, he should try, and then sharply twisted his arm to the side. Seeing what had happened, the servant grabbed a knife, became angry, and declared that this scoundrel was surely seeking death. A moment after the attack, blood spurted out, but the attacking boy began to tremble. The hero, shielding himself with Reno's body, felt the knife pierce the boy's chest. Saal smiled slyly and, as if not noticing, said he was sorry for accidentally using the boy as a shield. Then he pushed him forward and kicked him toward the servant. Reno and Lucien fell into the water together. The hero noticed that they were lucky, because this water could heal any wounds, so let them bathe a little. After all, they would still be useful to him for joint practice. He pondered how he would make them obey him unquestioningly in this life. The body of the wounded man sank into the water, and dark energy began to manifest there. At that moment, Saal caught the scent of dark magic. He didn't understand how such evil and forbidden magic could appear in healing springs. It reminded him of what the griffin had said, something strange. Therefore, he decided that it would be better not to go into the water and to find another way to reach the bottom of the spring without touching the water. The boy's thoughts were interrupted by the cry of a girl asking for help. He knew that voice well from his past life. The man dragged her along, saying that she couldn't even serve tea properly, so in his opinion, she deserved a good beating. But the little girl begged him to let her go. Saal realized that this was Adelia, the very girl the man was dragging away in a rage. He shouted, asking if she dared to object, and that he was going to hit her now. However, he did not succeed. In a moment, his words were interrupted. The main character used his weapon to cut through all obstacles. The other children screamed in panic that a man had been killed and that someone had to tell the guards. Saal approached his young companion and asked her with concern if she was all right. He smiled so sweetly that the girl couldn't help but feel comfortable around him. But she was shaking all over, and Saal didn't understand how he could have scared her. So he began to apologize for scaring her. But Adelia, embarrassed, quickly replied that it wasn't so. She sincerely thanked him for saving her, shyly mentioned that her name was Adelia, and asked his name. This girl had been his best friend in his past life, possessing magical talents that surpassed those of her peers. Once, they even had the opportunity to fight together on the battlefield, which was an unforgettable experience. The most important thing was that they liked each other even in the past. But even now, at a young age, she was very sweet. The girl noticed that he was distracted, Cooper, and still thanked him for saving her. Saal looked at her again and blushed because he really liked her. A little embarrassed, he smiled and said that it was no problem, because a gentleman would always do the same thing, and she could just call him Saal. However, he asked if Adelia knew how to empty this spring or reach the bottom without touching the water. He understood that he must not forget his mission, and since he had found the girl, everything should work out. Adelia asked if he had noticed it too. The boy asked, somewhat surprised, what his friend was talking about. She leaned over and whispered that there was some kind of strange magic in this spring. This magic heals any wound, but once it touches a person, no other remedy can heal their body. Saal realized that this was another way for the Cooper family to control their shadows, forcing them to turn to them for treatment. Adelia said she wanted to thank him for saving her, and knew a way to reach the bottom without touching the water. She concentrated, and streams of energy wrapped around her body, creating something amazing around her. Protective shells appeared on them, and she called it duck magic, because it made them look like ducks. Even when they were at the bottom, their feathers never got wet on the inside. The hero realized that this was insulation magic, and she had had a strange habit of calling it that since childhood. At that moment, several of the chief's subordinates approached, talking about the guy who had killed a man. Saal realized that things were bad, so he grabbed the girl by the hand and pulled her toward the pond. In a moment, their bodies were completely submerged in the magical water. Below, the boy saw that the underwater current led straight to the source, and perhaps they should move there. Adelia noticed what was happening and tried to say that they couldn't go there and that they needed to leave quickly. But by then it was too late. The rapid flow of water began to pull them deeper and deeper. After a while, the girl sat next to the hero's body, trying to wake him from his unconscious state. Suddenly, he heard a voice calling him and instantly opened his eyes. Gradually rising, he looked around the cave and wondered if this was it. He took out the key, and Adelia looked at it curiously and asked what it was. Saal replied that it was a precious key capable of opening the door leading to the spiritual sword. Adelia noticed that there was no door here and suggested that perhaps they would need to summon it somehow. She added that she did not know what a spiritual sword was, but she wanted to try it anyway. Using her power, she tried to direct the key to its owner to open the door that would lead to him. During her attempts, the plants on the ceiling began to move. Saal immediately sensed that something was wrong and said, "This is really bad." The plants turned out to be monsters seeking to attack them, and grabbing the girl, the hero rushed to escape. A moment later they fell, and the boy lay on the ground and looked around. Looking back, he saw the plant open its terrible mouth full of teeth and felt magic arise, which told him that a door had appeared. However, there was a problem. Adelia was unconscious, and he didn't know what to do about it, so he picked her up and hurried to a safer place. Realizing that there was nothing he could do, he decided to leave her there for the time being. Saal cast a spell of invisibility on her, which she had taught him in a previous life, so that she would not be found if enemies made their way here. A difficult battle awaited him, and it was only a test on the way to Brad's sword. So he began to slowly move toward that very scary door, behind which he found many corpses. The hero lost confidence at the sight of the dead bodies, but continued on his way. At the top of the hill, which was completely covered with human bodies, stood a creature with a victim in its hands. It was doing something strange to her, as if sucking out her life force. When the creature sensed the hero, it turned to him and greeted him. The Eden Springs turned out to be not just a place of rest and healing, but also a place where the Cooper family kept their concubines. Saal realized what had happened to these women, and wondered if they had all become food for the sword. He had barely come to his senses when a monster appeared next to him. The monster began to sniff him slowly, and said that it could indeed smell the scent of an S-level talent. Saal instantly became alert and jumped away from the monster. He couldn't understand how this creature knew about his level. His opponent used blood magic and suggested that he might be Alan Cooper, the child gifted with S-level talent from birth. This boy did not look like a spoiled heir, and the monster added mockingly that he was most likely just a bastard hoping for an inheritance. Soon their weapons clashed, and the monster said, "Pho," that he would not give it to him just like that. First, he had to pass his test. Saal told him not to worry, that you were there precisely to kill the creature. Opponent said that he was smaller and did not expect that from a descendant. To be honest, it's all quite presumptuous. The rivals immediately rushed to attack each other, and the fierce fighting between them did not stop. The cruel and bloody power possessed by the monster struck Saal. The monster immediately came closer and ordered that this kid was still too weak. Then it turned its attention to his body and was pleasantly surprised when it saw something. It was the healing of wounds, so it was unclear whether it was a gift from the griffin. He did not expect that this brainless bird would recognize him. And of course, he hadn't seen this griffin in a long time. The hero thought that he had sacrificed most of his power to seal his soul in his own sword. So the boy must get it, but with his current power, he even has a chance to do so. A few moments later, he got to his feet and used some kind of magic to strike his opponent. The creature's limbs were immediately struck by this weapon, and he asked, "Is this technique really the forbidden blood magic?" The boy said that the creature had been dead for a long time, and did not know that over the last 100 years, the Empire had invented several secret techniques to combat blood magic. And now he was going to kill his rival, rip out his heart, and get his inheritance. After hearing this, his companion immediately shouted at him not to do it. But when the boy's weapon was almost at his neck, the monster smiled. At that moment, he freed himself from the spell and said, with a smirk, while the hero didn't understand what was happening. So he tried to attack him quickly, but his opponent flew away, and, continuing to laugh, said that it was funny and he hadn't played with such a little mouse in a long time. However, right now the game would be over for him, because the creature was tired of entertaining him. Of course, could say that the guy really did have strength and talent, but while he was talking, he had already used his blood magic. Small ghosts appeared from the pool of blood, and there were many of them. Brad said that he did not have enough strength to earn the right to wield his sword. The boy took a defensive stance and realized that he could use cows to create spirits, which was a tremendous power. Suddenly, one of the ghosts that the man had just summoned attacked the boy from behind. Sil tried to dodge them and attack him in return, but realized that they were attacking him too often. So, in order to protect himself, he used the protective magic of the Holy Sword, and decided that he needed to use Perseus's sword to defend himself from his magic. Brad got close to his defensive technique and, touching him with his finger, said that it was useless. A few moments after he spoke, the protective force immediately collapsed and the hero was once again defenseless. But the monster did not stay where it was, and immediately approached the boy, grabbing him by the throat. Then it lifted him up and said that this man should know that after a cat plays with a mouse, it will eventually eat it. Something rather strange was happening, and the main character felt that his blood and strength were gradually draining away. The creature was insanely happy, and said that his aura was so warm and familiar, that one of his concubines had the same aura, and maybe it was his mother. Something immediately clicked in the boy's mind when he heard about his own mother. But the monster, trying to swallow it whole, said that it was great, because he would be able to taste her child. Saal remembered how his mother put him to bed and told him to fall asleep, because his mother was with him and would stroke him literally all night long. That time was very joyful because the boy ran freely after his mother and brought her flowers. But one day, when he was doing this, he fell awkwardly to the ground. And on that very day, his mother apologized to him and said that he had to leave. The son tried to reach her, but nothing worked. When the boy was left all alone, the other children constantly beat him up and called him the son of a concubine and a freak, saying he was useless trash that nobody wanted. And the main character was terrified when all this was happening and said that it simply couldn't be true, because even now he was sure that his mother could not have abandoned him. All these memories immediately came to his mind when the monsters mentioned his mother. His eyes instantly flashed with anger at that moment, and the hero thought that this monster had killed his mother. So he yelled at the monster too, and he immediately yelled about it and plunged his blade right into its chest. The bloody power immediately began to spread around them in huge streams. Brad was surprised that this was blood-sucking, and that a simple boy was capable of using his magic. After that, he took the fight more seriously and threw the boy aside, thinking that this scoundrel would rather burn his blood than kill him. The creature really did spend too much blood and energy on the bloody spirits, so it needed to eat a couple more women to replenish its strength. Brad actually started to do this, and the hero approached him and asked if it tasted good. After that, he sat down closer and noticed that he was asking him if his mother was tasty, and at that moment, he was simply insane. And when he pierced the creature's head, blood spurted out, and his mother appeared before his eyes. The boy froze for a few seconds before seeing her face with tearful eyes. Without pausing for a second, he drove his sword deeper to kill the monster. So, a few moments later, the monster's body fell to the ground, lifeless. To his great surprise, the creature was still alive and thought that the boy had completely lost his mind. He needed to retreat and find a couple more concubines. And if that didn't happen, he would die anyway. But suddenly he felt a weapon approaching his back. The main character really did go mad at that moment and continued to attack. Brad begged not to be killed at that moment, because it can merge with his ball and become a spiritual weapon, as well as give him more power, but the boy continued to destroy it. Then, looking at him very contemptuously, he said that this monster did not deserve it. After that, he used his power once more, and its destructive force tore the monster's body to pieces. So all that remained was the magic of blood, which splattered to the side. After absorption, the inheritance of fencing skills will forever merge with the hero's body. He threw away his weapon and thought about sharpening it, not forgetting because he had not seen his mother since birth. Therefore, it was just a crazy fantasy, and it was a very pathetic monster. Suddenly, he saw his reflection in a pool of blood, his mother hugging him and saying that he was not a monster and that she would always be there for him. And suddenly, her thoughts about the boy were interrupted by a girl, who addressed him by name. It was Adelia, who rushed to him and asked if he was all right. She couldn't understand why he was covered in blood, and whether he was injured, and if so, she would heal him. The boy just looked at her coldly. When his companion came closer, she touched his head and began to heal him. At that moment, the main character realized that in his past life, Adelia had become this creature's concubine. Then he came closer and immediately embraced his friend. At that moment, he promised himself that in this life he would not allow anyone to touch her, not even with their fingers. Blood-sucking is a technique that allows you to offer your blood to the sword, and then burn it to enhance the weapon's characteristics. After the disappearance of the demon that was the spirit of Brad's sword, real discord began in the Cooper family, and all the guardians of the sources of Eden were sentenced to death. The servants who witnessed Sel's fury no longer dared to behave so rudely towards Adelia. According to rumors, it was Sel who stole the spirit sword from the springs. However, without any evidence, Alan's mother could only continue her persecution. This involved imprisonment, blood sampling, and poisoning. Although the hero remained unharmed in any case, the events now take place 4 years later at the Cooper training ground. Alan fought with his subjects and mocked them, saying that they were weaklings and could not defeat him. The head of the family, Isaac, who watched the fight, said that he heard that this boy was born with talent, but today, he was convinced of it. The head of the Cooper family, Duke Leon, thanked him for his words. Suddenly, their attention was drawn to a cheerful donkey who asked them to look. On the other side was the main character, who was being attacked by several people. He noticed that they were too noisy. After that, he casually raised his weapon and used his shadow blade. Therefore, with just one attack, these people were defeated and immediately fell to the ground. The spectators who were standing on the balcony were delighted because they understood that this was a high-level technique. Isaac said that usually children are at the level of an iron sword adept. But when it comes to this child, he has clearly already reached the level of a silver sword defender, which is simply incredible. He got angry about this and thought that he was a scoundrel because he dared to steal his triumph. In a fit of rage, he turned to Saal and said that he was challenging him to a fight. The hero smiled at this and thought if Alan had acquired his talent as in his previous life, his power would now be greater. But now it's a great chance to find out how strong he is, and he agreed to a duel. The gentleman said that he should attack, and decided that these were excellent chances to finish him off. The subordinates immediately began to cheer and support Alan so that he would defeat this bastard and show him the true art of fencing. With admiration and excitement, the boy immediately rushed into the attack and thought that he would defeat him with ease. Sal easily blocked his attack and said, telling the gentleman to use his strength, for surely Mother Nature herself favored him. Alan was shocked by these words, and the hero easily pushed him away with his weapon. When the young master and the services merged and thought that it was impossible, because his mother said that with his current strength, no one could match him in battle. He was on a plane, and even the magical aura from the sword was insignificant. Obviously, it was just an artificial enhancement, so he had no talent for fencing. Sal dodged his attack and asked to be allowed to show him what a real blow was. A few moments later, Alan turned around and saw a boy rushing towards him. The main character aimed for the head and pierced his opponent's eye. The subordinates were horrified when this happened and immediately began to run away, while the master cried pitifully about his eye. After seeing this, Isaac began to laugh at how insignificant the situation was. He said that he must have been mistaken, and that perhaps the servants had just lost to the gentleman and were simply pretending. His interlocutors said that he was forgetting something himself. The man added that after all, Mr. Allen was engaged to his younger sister and he didn't want her to marry a nobody. Leon said that he was worrying too much, and that if it weren't for the enemy of convenience, it was unclear whether his sister would marry someone or not. The interlocutor turned around and said that it was time for him not to forget that joint activities between their families would take place in 10 days. Cooper thought about those words, that Alan really was a nobody. So he asked his subordinate what this shadow's name was. She said his name was Sal, and that he was the son of one of his concubines. The man thought, if he is his son, then it's no wonder why he is so skilled with a sword. He then asked for him to be brought to his office. After a while, the main character was invited to the Duke's office, and he headed there. When he entered, the man immediately began to stare at him intently. Sal bowed and asked, what did Mr. Leon want? He thought that he saw no innate talent in him. Perhaps the boy is hiding his powers in order to fight for the right to become the heir. One could say that he definitely has some kind of motive. It's good that he's a boy and can be easily exposed. The Duke said that in 10 days, the boy will lead the 10th squad of shadows. Together with Isaac's people, they will go to the Lost Crystal City to obtain dragon eggs for their families. This sword activates teleportation to the Crystal City. Sal thought that in order to get them, they would inevitably encounter the dragon and anger it. Believes that this is not an easy mission, and that Leon has something in mind. However, how could he miss such an opportunity to become a dragon egg? So he took the sword and obeyed his master. Then said that in return he had a small request, and the Duke was very surprised by this. And so, after a while, the group set off, with Sal and Adelia riding ahead on a griffin. The girl said, "Didn't he tell the head of the family that she would accompany them as a maid? Hey, it's kind of uncomfortable to sit like this the whole way." The hero said not to worry, that no one had any objections. He looked at the guys who had fought him before, but now obeyed him. Sal and his squad finally arrived, and his subordinates asked, "Is this really the Crystal City?" But it's unclear where the crystals and the dragon's nest are. On the other side, a girl's voice appeared who said that she did not expect that the Cooper family's elite squad did not even know anything about this city. How funny it was for her to say that. This was Gloria Isaac, the younger sister of the head of the house and Alan's fiancé. The girl held out her hand to Sal Cooper and said that this was their first meeting, so he could just call her Gloria. But the hero ignored her and told Adelia that she and Meow should stay here, and he would be back soon. Isaac's heiress was angry that he was playing her, so she told the boy that she was actually talking to him. Sel called her lady, and said that he was afraid that if they didn't activate the portal before sunset, their whole trip would be in vain. The main character wondered that he had met this noisy woman again, just like in his previous life, where she had annoyed him with her training. Although now none of that mattered. All that remained was to hope that this silly bird would be able to accomplish the task assigned to her. Together with the girl, they approached the altar, and it began to glow. This altar is a teleportation formation. Soon everyone was transported to the city and said it was beautiful, and also that the legendary egg was somewhere here. Gloria's subordinate thought that they should kill the Cooper family, and then the egg would belong to them. And when they returned, the boss would surely reward him for it. At the same time, the main character sensed danger and shouted for everyone to run away quickly. A few moments later, there was an explosion, which raised a large amount of dust. At the same time, the Guardians of Light, who are the guardians of the Crystal City, appeared around them. Gloria immediately took out her weapon and, rushing into the attack, shouted that they were pathetic scum. She then used her skill called Thorn Cut and easily struck one of the guards. The girl began to scold the knight for giving you the right to be presumptuous. The subordinate replied that it was for the sake of their home, but the interlocutor said that he was doing it for himself. While the heiress of the Azex was distracted, several guards appeared behind her. Milady realized that everything was bad because she would not have time to react, but suddenly, they were immediately destroyed. And it was the main character who did it, using his power. After that, he turned to his subordinate Shadows and told them that he was ordering them to prepare for battle. Of course, they immediately obeyed him, and rushed into a furious attack, one after another. Within a few moments, the entire squad lined up and immediately thrust their swords into the ground, so that soon a shadow began to recede from them. It was heading straight for the leader of the squad, that is, the main character who was supposed to use this power. The guards were surprised when they felt its power, and began to look in different directions. Sal rushed into the attack and wanted to see which was better, their shadow or their light power. The energy immediately went to the guards and continued to bind them. The second squad said that these people had simply captured the guards. Is probably the Cooper family's style, combining swordplay and magic, and Sal is just a child, yet he possesses such power. Gloria was embarrassed when this happened, and thought that this boy was very good indeed. A large amount of energy began to accumulate in the crystal at that moment. The boy thought that it wasn't bad because he managed to absorb the power of the crystal core, and now he had advanced from the level of a silver blade guard to a golden sword master. Now all that remained was to put the crystal he was holding in his hands back in its place. So Sal immediately headed there and placed the crystal where it belonged. When this happened, the earth began to shake, and it seemed as if an earthquake had occurred. But it turned out that this was not the case, and the altar was falling, so it was necessary to run quickly towards it, because the secret passage to the dragon's lair was open. Those present immediately headed for the altar, and it gradually began to descend. As a result, they all ended up in a dark room, and there were dragon eggs everywhere. The Cooper family's subordinates were delighted that there were so many of them here, and probably they would not have to share them. But a member of the neighboring squad did not think so. The hero thought to himself, they are idiots of course because they want to become dinner for the dragon so quickly. But then he thought about the situation when the dragon appeared and began to scream viciously. The main character's subordinate ran away. Gloria said not to do that and to fight to the end. Sal said how he would finish. Let them take the dragon egg. At the same time, the altar began to rise on its own, and the others asked what was happening. It turned out that Gray was there, and he pressed the crystal. Earlier, the head of the family told to use the other shadows as bait for the dragon, and once they got the egg, let get out of there. They would also need to destroy the formation. Sal would be able to stand up for himself. The guy apologized to his comrades and said that only the Cooper family could take possession of the dragon's egg. So let them sacrifice their lives until he delivers this egg to the family. Gloria said how cruel the head of their family was because doing this not only to them, but also to his own people was very treacherous. The guy noticed that this was to be expected. The girl asked if that was the case, then why did he come here to certain death? Sal replied that she was thinking too much. Soon they rushed together to attack the dragon, which was trying to attack them with its power. Responding to his companion's recent question, the hero rushed into the attack and said that everything was happening because he couldn't die here. So he attacked the creature, and his attack hit its target, causing the monster great pain. But naturally, it remained alive and immediately counterattacked the guy. That's why after the blow, his body ended up deep in the ground, where there was a crater. The dragon tried to finish him off with his attack, but Gloria used the protection of the Moonblade. She didn't understand what was happening, and whether he was okay. Saal gradually got up and said that you are doing well. Let the girl delay him, and he will attack the heart. He begged very earnestly, saying, "Do it, because only we can handle this." These words, of course, touched the girl, and she agreed with embarrassment. She also thought that she was a talented fencer too, and she couldn't let this guy underestimate her. The main character just smiled when she rushed forward, and soon his interlocutor told him that now was the time, and he should attack. When she noticed that the boy was not responding, she asked what was wrong. Were they really not going to do anything? The situation was bad because maybe he had been hit and couldn't attack at such a pace. They would definitely die. It turned out now there was only one way out. Without a moment's hesitation, she used a skill called the destructive blade dance. After using this deadly technique, blades appeared out of nowhere and attacked the dragon in front of them. Soon it seemed that the creature immediately fell down exhausted and remained where it was. Gloria thought, could it really have worked? The subordinates of the Union detachment immediately ran up to the dragon, rejoicing without kicking it with their feet. The girl looked at the situation and thought, could it be true that she succeeded? Suddenly the creature began to wake up, and the guys noticed this and said that it was bad because the dragon was furious, so they needed to find shelter urgently. Gloria was very surprised by this and asked what had happened. Saal in turn knew that this would happen, so he just smiled and used the third technique of the sword's legacy. Namely, he used the blood shadow attack and attacked the creature. The blood that came from his weapon quickly, who was heading towards the dragon and enveloping its body. After the guy appeared, phantoms appeared whom he summoned as if Brad had completely when they fought together. His subordinates were surprised that he turned the blood of his clones dragons. Gloria said that it was forbidden Maya, or wished that the Cooper family had the right to use it. Then she thought that only Brad Cooper could use it, but he had recently disappeared. Suddenly, she realized that the boy had deliberately done nothing and waited until the blood was knocked out of him. It infuriated her so much that she said Cooper was a petty scoundrel, and it was unclear how he could use her for himself. The hero rushed into the attack and said that everything was fine. He thought that in his past life he had been used because he was trash, but in this one, he would not sit idly by and wait for death. The dragon's head was severed by his weapon in a matter of moments. It fell to the ground and blood gushed out of it. The girl shouted that it wasn't bad, and that the demonic dragon had been defeated. As soon as she tried to get closer to the guy and rejoice with him, he pointed his weapon at her and told her not to come near him. His gaze at that moment was as if he were mad, and a dark force emanated from his weapon and body. He and the hero tried to hold back the power that was trying to take over his body. Brad appeared in his mind asking did he really think that he could live peacefully after the murder, that he would become the same as he was before, because he would need to consume a lot of the blood and flesh of his victims. He should attack these people right now, because they are not his prey, and he should enjoy them to the fullest. The boy rushed into the attack and shouted that he needed more blood. His subordinates ran away, shouting that he had become a demon because he had used so much blood. Suddenly, Adelia appeared, who used her power and immediately turned to Saal. The boy's body was covered with energy, and soon he fell to the ground. At that moment, he seemed to continue sinking into the dark blood, while the girl tried to save him and pull him out of there. After a while, he heard a familiar voice asking him to wake up, so he opened his eyes and saw that Adelia was sitting next to him. The girl noticed that she was glad he had woken up. She used a purification spell, and it reversed his transformation into a demon, so they were able to get out of there. After that, she got up and happily started talking about the egg she had received. The guy who tried to run away with it was caught, and the girl said it was the last whole egg. Of course, she didn't tell the Isaac family about him, and the red-haired girl had already left, so he didn't have to worry about them completing their task. Saal thanked her for that and said that now he could rest easy. Thought that the original plan was to rescue this girl from the Cooper family. He wanted Meow to take her far away from here to fake her death, and call it all an accident. Grabbing his weapon, shouted that this stupid bird couldn't even handle a simple task. Griffin wanted to say that it wasn't his fault, but the hero continued to scold him. However, the girl tried to defuse the situation and asked everyone to discuss it and not react so violently. Suddenly, the hero heard that the stable boy's son was addressing him and looked at him. The boy saw how these children grabbed their weapons and tried to attack. So he got worried and said that they had finally shown their true colors, so he should try to take the egg away from him. But at that moment, he was very surprised when he saw what had actually happened, because his subordinates pierced the body of the guy who was trying to frame them, and then each of the shadows knelt down right in front of Mr. The boy apologized for his rudeness earlier. If it weren't for him, they would have died in the ruins. From now on, they will no longer obey the orders of the family, and will follow him until death and even beyond. Saal was very surprised because he did not expect that he would have such loyal subordinates. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to Adelia, who told Saal to look because the dragon egg had begun to hatch. In fact, a few moments later, a dragon appeared, roaring joyfully, and it turned out that it had indeed been born. Saal immediately told that the dragon would only obey the strongest, so he asked if he wanted to be with him. The creature flew up to him, touched his hand, and kindly agreed. The stable boy's son and his friend said it was great because the dragon was now with them. So the new subordinates congratulated their master on taming the dragon, and today Saal Cooper's rebel group was born. At the estate, Alan asked his mother when they would go horseback riding. She replied that it would happen as soon as his father finished work. The man shouted, "What's the point? He's just having fun and is no better than a bastard," because he knows that Sela not only managed to kill the dragon, but also tamed the cub. Hera said it wasn't Alan's fault, and why was he angry with him? If he had been there instead of Sela, he would have done the same. The boy just agreed with her. Then, his mother said there was nothing to talk about, and took her son by the hand, saying that they would go skating together today, just the two of them. The boy happily ran out of the room and asked for the whip to be brought quickly. The lady approached the old man and asked how the research on magic was progressing. He told her not to worry because they had successfully completed the research. Now all that remained was to find an S-level test subject to test the spell's effectiveness, and then use it on Saal Cooper. The woman, with madness and disgust in her voice, said that was good. This time, they would finally get rid of him. 5 years have passed since all these events. The hero sat with Adelia, and she said that after this procedure, he would be completely cleansed. He would be completely protected from turning into a demon, and would be able to use his techniques without any problems. Smiling sweetly, Saal thanked her. The girl closed, saying that it was not worth it because she should thank him for the new staff, which he really liked. At that moment, they saw a silhouette from the window and immediately became alert. The hero immediately opened it and noticed that someone was coming. Of course, he had already run away, but judging by the figure, it was the butler. By that time, subordinates had entered the house and told Mr. Cooper that they had come with a report on his assignment. They had been watching the family's palace the whole time and had found out everything. They had gathered dark magicians to perform some kind of ritual in 3 days. It was said that they had found a person with S-level talent who possessed incredible abilities. The guy wondered if this was true, but why did they need another target instead of pursuing him? They found someone else. And a thought immediately popped into his head that their target was Adelia. The planned time passed, and the girl rummaged through the warehouse because it was messy. Suddenly, she heard someone behind her, and it was the butler who was trying to hit her. A few moments later, he grabbed her and put a handkerchief with a substance on her, after which she was supposed to fall asleep. Although the girl tried to resist in any way she could, she felt that she was losing consciousness. Soon, she was in a magic circle, and dark magic was performing a ritual. The butler, like the others, did all this, and asked the darkness to give them power over the force, as if a shadow follows a person. The old man tried to kill the girl, and realized that when her blood merged with the magical information, all the power would belong to him. As soon as he tried to strike the place where the girl was, she disappeared somewhere, and he was surprised. The man heard Adelia's voice somewhere nearby, saying that it was just a simple illusion. Her companion was very angry at that moment, and told the old man not to underestimate her. Without hesitation, she used her staff and a skill called Starlight Chain. So her opponent, who was trying to kill her, was soon bound, and then surprised, because this little girl turned out to be more cunning than he thought. Then he turned to the dark wizards and said that they were standing there doing nothing and should at least help him. Adelia sat down and thought that he had sat down. He said to just close your eyes after that and cover your ears. The butler heard something strange that was in the sky and did not understand what was happening at all. Suddenly, those present saw a griffin nearby, as well as a dragon. It turned out that these two monsters attacked at the same time. Of course, sensing danger, the people tried to flee, but the creatures easily killed them with their powers. The old man immediately thought, could these be Sel's creatures? Suddenly he heard that the hero said he dared to touch Adelia. Apparently, the hour of his death had come. Now the man could see with his own eyes that it was indeed Sel. The hero approached him and leaned his weapon further away, noticing that he was speaking about why they needed the girl. His interlocutor noted that it was necessary for the ritual. It was important to check the functionality to make sure that Master Alan would receive his talent, which is why they wanted to find such a person and check everything. The hero immediately became alert at that moment, thinking, which meant that Adelia was in danger because of him. Soon he said that he could indeed let the old man go. However, it was not that simple, and at that moment he was born into his own hand. The butler realized that blood magic would be used on him right now. Sal ordered him to return to Madame Cooper and tell that the ritual had been successful. Now she can use it on him, and if she doesn't, she'll find out what will happen. The interlocutor asked why he needed it. The guy looked at him bloodthirstily and said that it was necessary in order to reveal who Alan really was. The butler returned and told the lady that everything had gone well. The woman asked if it was true. In response, she heard that it was true, that the next full moon would be the young master's coming-of-age celebration, and that they would be able to do it. Hera happily said that he was a good man, and thought that her long-standing dream would come true. Her mother would take care of her son, and ensure that he became the new head of the family without any problems. Alan was just pestering Gloria, and said that she was playing hard to get, but unfortunately, he had already figured that out. At that moment, he was glad that his mother had arranged the meeting. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a girl who pointed a gun at him and asked which prude she was talking about. It was unclear how such a fool could be her fiancé. The guy was terrified and thought, has this girl gone mad? Gloria swung her weapon and said that for starters, he had deleted the fights, and the boy asked her to stop. And then, out of nowhere, the main characters appeared who crossed swords with her. Then he smiled and asked the gentleman if everything was all right with him because he had come to save him. Alan, getting angry, said where did he get the idea that he needed saving? All he did was take his sword for a walk. He couldn't understand how this scoundrel dared to mock him. The girl asked Saal where he came from. Well, in any case, it's wonderful, and we should go and arrange a duel. The hero, in response to this, tried to avoid the subject. Alan was horrified, thinking, could it be that she had fallen in love with him? Gloria was embarrassed and said that not everyone gets the opportunity to fight her, so let him think carefully. Angered, the gentleman wanted to yell at them for behaving this way with each other. But suddenly his mother interrupted him and asked him to come to her, so the boy decided that he would deal with this woman after the wedding. So he said that the lady did not wish to honor him with her presence, and he would leave her. The girl said, now, when no one is getting in the way, if he refuses her, she will attack. The guy agreed and noticed that there was a request before that. He said that he would very much like to meet her older brother, Duke Isaac. So, after a short time, they met. Saal said that he had a plan to break the marriage contract between Gloria and Alan. But to do so, he will need their help, and for them to lend him a family heirloom, the Box of Illusions. The hero knew that this man was dissatisfied with Alan and the alliance with the Cooper family. He tried many times to break their joint contract, but the royal family rejected his requests. So now the guy can take advantage of this chance. The man quickly wounded him with his weapon, and said that he was a reckless boy, and it was unclear how he could destroy the royal contract and ask him for a favor. Saal noticed that they needed him because he could solve all their problems. Hugh was surprised when he saw his blade, and thought that the family really did have S-level talent. At the same time, the heroes, without stopping, rushed into the attack, and said that since they could not break the marriage contract, perhaps they should get rid of the insignificant young gentleman. Now he was curious what the Duke himself thought about this. A month passed after these events, and everyone was preparing for the ritual. The butler said everything was ready. The only thing wrong was the absence of Saal himself. Jera noticed that she understood everything, and now he could be free. The bastards of the family were nearby discussing. Then they were called to slander them, saying with regret that only Alan could lead their family. A subordinate told his master that all the guests were already in place, and on their instructions, the table was set for, so that they would not have to wait. Hugh had just greeted Duke Cooper, and asked if he wanted to chat for a bit. The man was surprised when he saw the tongue and said that he hadn't invited him. The interlocutor noted that, after all, it was a coming-of-age celebration, and he also wanted to join the feast. The hero was nearby and said that it was time to activate the box. The subordinate noted that he understood everything and immediately disappeared from this place, carrying out the plan. The shadows directed their weapons and powers at the box, and asked it to open the gates of the abyss and pull the illusion out of the shadows. After these manipulations, the box was finally supposed to open in a moment. In the end, everything went according to plan, and the estate was enveloped in the very illusion that the hero needed. As I stood there watching, I heard a voice from the side saying that he had found him. It turned out to be Alan who noticed. Why was the guy hiding here all alone? Did he really want to hide? Cold air was coming from the dungeon, and dark magic was seeping out. There was the main character, who was already tied up, and Alan was holding a weapon right in front of him. Then he rushed into the attack and said that now this guy's talent would belong to him. So, Saal, he was killed in a few moments. Only blood flowed from his wounds. At that moment, Adelia appeared, saw this scene, and was very frightened. But soon the girl came to her senses, and it turned out that she was in a warehouse. Her companion told her to stop dozing and get up to work. The hero's friend saw that it was the power of the stars. So it was not a dream, but a vision from a past life. The power of the stars is a gift that can be unlocked by time magicians. Wizards who possess it are able to use the power to see fragments of the past or the future. Adelia realized that there was danger and rushed towards him. She understood perfectly well that she had to stop Alan before he reached him, and suddenly he found himself. The girl noticed Alan handing the glass to Saal and saying that his father had asked him to pass it on. So I realized that everything was bad, and used the advice of calmness and the power of the stars to put him to sleep so that Alan would sleep for several months. But suddenly she heard someone addressing her and looked over there. It turned out to be Hera, who wanted to stop her, so she ordered her subordinate to do so, and he immediately rushed towards her. When the young man grabbed her, he began to hold so that she couldn't say a word. The woman thought, didn't Dog say that the experiment was successful? It's not clear why she is still able to use magic. In any case, now was not the time to think about that, and she needed to focus on performing the ritual. Saal, in turn, took the glasses that were offered to him and began to drink the liquid. A few moments later, he immediately fell to the ground and lost consciousness. Alan said that he was an idiot for falling for the same trick twice. Soon, the guy found himself tied up in the basement, and his master beat him. Also asked where he got his S-level talent. It was still unclear how he was able to defeat the demonic dragon on his own. On top of all this, his beloved Calorie could also fall in love with him. All of this should have belonged only to Alan, not to this bastard. Hera asked him to stop because it was enough to vent his anger and let him get down to business. His son agreed, and Dog presented him with a dagger, saying that this dagger had been specially made so that he could pierce his indestructible body. His master took it and said, "What a pity that this boy's talent will now belong to him." Without a moment's hesitation, he immediately pierced the heart of the main character and tried to kill him. Smiling madly, Alan shouted, so that he would beg for mercy, because he would still become the only worthy heir to the Cooper family. He would also be the most talented of all, and with his enormous strength and impenetrable body, no one would be able to defeat him. A few moments later, it turned out that the main character was alive, and began to laugh loudly, saying that the performance had been a success. Alan and his mother were simply stunned when they saw that Saal was actually alive. The guy easily freed himself from the chains and told that he'd better open his eyes and see whose fate was really going downhill. At that moment, the hero dispelled the illusion that had been cast over the estate, and they found themselves in the banquet hall. Alan and Hero were amazed that they were really in this place where there were so many people. Those present began to say that they were madmen because they had done such a thing in front of people, which meant that this was who the gentleman really was, and all the rumors turned out to be true. Hera was shocked because she didn't understand how the boy knew about this plan. The ritual test probably failed, but it's not clear when everything went wrong. Alan tried to explain that it wasn't his fault and that he had been set up, but everyone understood perfectly well. Hugh clapped his hands and said what a magnificent performance. It's interesting what Duke Cooper will say about this now. The man was very angry at that moment and immediately started yelling at Alan because of it. The boy didn't know what to say, and his mother said that she had made him do it. If he wanted to punish someone, it would be better to punish her. But the Duke didn't listen to her at all and, approaching the boy, immediately hit him hard. The hero looked at what was happening and said that it was cruel. Alan got down on his knees and asked what he had done wrong, because this pathetic bastard should rightfully belong to him. After this statement, those present began to discuss how the Duke had earned his fame. But now, after these words, his reputation would be shaken. The head of the family became angry, and then asked if his son really thought that way. Pointing his weapon and using his power, he said that the children should listen because today the competition for the inheritance begins. The bastards were surprised by this, and began to wonder what it all meant. But soon they realized that now they too could fight for the right to become the heir by any means necessary. Their eyes became fierce, for there were no restrictions. So at first they planned to kill Alan Hugh himself, laughed and said that this is the legendary spirit of the Cooper family and strength above all else. But thankfully, it all ended, and now the contract should be broken, because he won't let his sister marry a man who can talk big, but is a weakling. Duke Cooper understood what had just happened. It was clearly the work of the Box of Illusions. It was obvious that Isaac was in cahoots with this child. Many other aristocrats gathered at the celebration, and any rumor that reached the royal family would only harm them, so for now, it was best to retreat. The man told Isaac not to worry because he would discuss it with His Majesty, and then contact him. His interlocutor remarked that he had expected this wise decision. Chief Cooper said that as far as Saal was concerned, anyone could inherit the right, but one could not disgrace the family name with one's actions. Therefore, if someone violates this, they will disappear without a trace. The guy started laughing when he heard this and asked if he really thought that he wanted to become the heir. At that moment, he touched the man's weapon and said that if he wanted him to disappear, he should do it now, and also called him father. The interlocutor was very surprised and thought that this kid was amazing, so it was unclear what he wanted. He immediately put away his weapon and decided that this was enough. The subordinate turned to the gentleman and asked if it was true that he did not want to teach him a lesson. The old man said that he did not want to, as he was a pretty strong guy, and he was curious to see what he would do next. At the same time, he thought that this boy clearly had an unpleasant character, and didn't even know where he got it from. Soon, Hera scolded Dog and asked where the leak came from. It was clear who had told about their plans. The man replied that he didn't know either. At that moment, his subordinates arrived with the captive and asked what to do with the servant. In a rage, the woman replied that they hadn't fed her to the animals, and it was unclear why they were asking. Suddenly, stopped because she realized that she had clearly used the mage recently, and this could have happened either because the experiment had failed or for another reason, because there is a high probability that they did not take anything away at all. In a rage, the woman asked the old man if he had really deprived her of her talent, and then perhaps he would show it to her right now. The man said that he had not yet mastered the high-level talent. Hera noticed that the excuse was enough and ordered to finish him off. His subordinates grabbed the man, but he begged them to listen to her, because it was all Saal Cooper's fault, and he had forced him to do it. But a few moments later, he was killed. The lady said that the dog had betrayed its owner, and he killed it, so why bother with unnecessary explanations? As for this girl, it would be better for her to take her talent and find a more suitable use for it. So she immediately picked her up and began to use her power. But a few moments later, she was shocked because there were no burns on her body. If that's the case, could it mean that she has the body of an icy moon? Girls with such bodies become amplifiers when they reach maturity. A man who becomes a partner of an amplifier will be able to increase his power thanks to her. And in that case, this girl could definitely be useful to her. After a while, the hero reflected that he did not think that after such an incident, Alan would be left in the family with a combination of lack of talent, but the possible reason lies in the influence of his mother. Although it is unclear why he was allowed to stay in the castle, perhaps to restrain him or to prevent him from running away, the woman may be worried about this. But Saal is not going anywhere until he causes Alan a lot of pain. Suddenly, he heard a knock and thought it was Adelia, so he told her to leave. But it was Gloria who noticed that she had been told to return the box. She had some free time and decided to come and pick it up herself. The hero wondered whether he would be able to enlist the support of his family Isaac. Even if he personally killed Alan, nothing would happen. He told everyone that he thought their families were equal. But why was a box that simply created illusions under very strict conditions a family heirloom? Gloria said that if he's interested, she won't tell him yet. No one believes in this legend. but all the aristocrats know about it, so she'll use it to make a deal with Saal. The guy ended up saying goodbye to her casually, and Gloria got angry and said she wanted to fight him. So, after a short while, they were already on the training ground. The girl rushed into the attack using her spiked sword, but with a single swing of his weapon, his opponent easily deflected her attack. She pointed her weapon at him again and said that she had lost again. The girl indignantly said that he had no manners. Saal turned around and pointed out that she herself had asked him not to hold back. According to their agreement, she had to reveal the secret of the box of illusions to him. Gloria noticed that this was just a legend, which said that a person who had mastered the power of the stars themselves, as well as the magic of time, could use the box. This is done so that he can bring another person back to life at the cost of his own. Saal thought, could it be that in his past life, Adelia sacrificed her life to bring him back to this world, so that now he must take care of her? Because they would allow Alan to harm her. By that time, her subordinates had hurriedly arrived and announced that Lady Adelia had been kidnapped. The hero was very surprised when he heard this with his own ears, so he began to report to hurry up and tell who did it. The guy said last night they prepared a box and saw how Mrs. Cooper was taken away by people. And Gloria also heard in the maid's conversation that he took the girl as a maid, and when she comes of age, she will become his concubine. So she said that at first, she thought they meant Saal when they talked about the young gentleman. After receiving this information, the hero became angry and started to run out of the room. The girl shouted that he was clearly not going to save anyone or kill anyone. Alan was angry that this bastard dared to humiliate him, but he was asked to wait a little because he had to wait until he came of age. The gentleman did not listen to them at all, and therefore shouted for them to kill him. One of the guys said that this girl whom they were holding was very much liked by Saal Cooper, so why not take revenge on her? The young man said that it was a good idea. He promised the concubine that under his sensitive guidance, she would become a professional courtesan. Odo did not understand what to do because these chains restrained her strength, so she could not escape, and begged him to save her. Alan said that it was interesting how she would look during lovemaking, so she had better get used to the role of a concubine as quickly as possible. At the same time, the main character appeared and hit Anna very hard on the head with his hand. The boy, who had been acting very arrogantly at that moment, immediately fell to the ground. The guy decided to finish him off with his foot and shouted, so that he would die. Alan was in a lot of pain from this blow because he felt the sore spot. But Saal did not stop his attacks, and continued to beat him with all parts of his body. So soon there were no bones left in his opponent's body, as they were all broken. The hero could not stop, and his dark, ominous aura continued to accumulate in this place. His subordinates tried to protect their young master, but nothing worked, as the hero easily defeated them with his attacks. When the guys from his squad arrived, they saw a terrible scene before them. Gloria helped Adelia free herself and told her to hurry up and help before he turned into a demon again. At that moment, the girl hugged him and asked him to wake up, saying, everything is fine with her now. And the head of the family's people also successfully took Alan, who had been severely beaten. Suddenly, Hera arrived and saw her beaten son and was simply horrified. Then she started screaming that the boy was an ungrateful bastard, and that this was how he repaid his father for allowing him to stay in the castle. The hero took off his necklace and took out his weapon, then slowly began to walk forward. Soon he was standing next to the woman he had been talking to. Hera asked in horror, "What are you doing?" The boy slowly pierced his hand with the blade, and blood gushed out. He then turned to Alan and said that he was challenging him to a deadly fight to the last drop of blood, thinking that he could not allow Adelia's life to be threatened. After some time, the day of the competition arrived, and those present were in the arena. Saal stated that he did not even expect that he would actually come and not spend all 7 days trying to escape. He asked why he should miss such an opportunity to crush him like a pathetic insect. At that moment, the hero saw his shield and thought that it gave him goosebumps. The contest began, and the jellyfish shield began to attack him with its rays. Naturally, the main character dodged the petrifying beam, and his opponent only laughed at this. Saal realized that even a saint would be powerless against Medusa's shield, because petrification doesn't even count as damage, so he couldn't counter it with an oath. First, he must destroy this weapon, Alan said. Who would have thought that he would take Perseus's sword and give him Medusa's shield? The guy didn't answer him and just rushed into the attack, but his opponent said that it was all useless. When he was already a few meters away from him and tried to attack, Alan summoned Medusa. That is why the shield ended up near its owner, and tried to attack with its beam. But this attack was unsuccessful because the hero rushed to the shield and cut it where the eyes were. Because of this, some kind of green liquid poured out of his eyes and scattered in all directions. At that moment, the heroes were even more confident in themselves, so they rushed forward and said that Alan would die. A few moments later, the body was cut open, but it turned out to be just an illusion. Alan laughed at this, and said that he was now a wizard with a golden staff. Then he used his dark magic and told the innocent souls to devour him. This black magic is called the Curse of Devouring. Hugh said that he was a scoundrel because thousands of innocent souls would be needed to use this magic. So he turned to Brad and said that he demanded an explanation. His interlocutor noted that it was a family secret, so he asked him to respect their traditions. Alan saw that the heroes weren't dodging and shouted that he was an idiot, so let him enjoy the pain. Suddenly, he saw that it wasn't working and didn't understand how this was possible because he had practiced this ability hundreds of times and it was impossible to just break through them. Angered, He summoned even more spirits and yelled at the bastard to go to hell, so more dark souls immediately headed towards the guy. Alan didn't understand how they didn't hurt the guy. The hero noticed that he had fought enough, so it was time to die. The gentleman used shadow death and damage transfer and asked how he thought that he could hit him, since he was his shadow. But at that moment, a completely different guy who was standing aside was wounded. Saal thought that he had forgotten that the oath automatically transferred any damage to his shadow. The guy asked what happened. Did he really care about the lives of these bastards? At the same time, he used black magic, the Staff of Life. This ability absorbs the life force of another person and attacks the chosen target. Alan thought that although he didn't know why, he managed to avoid the influence of the Shadow Oath, but there was no way to escape these souls. He would spend the staff's attack power on them. At that moment, the life force of the other shadows began to drop sharply, and they fell to the ground. Alan laughed and said, "Look at yourselves," because he had already given up. "It's just a pity that this won't stop him and everyone else. You deserve this fate." At the same time, the main character plunged his blade deep into the ground. Then she used forbidden magic, namely bloody information. So this dark power spread throughout the area, approaching Alan and destroying his power. The shadows of this man regained their vitality, and they were grateful to their boss for this. At the same time, a dragon appeared in the sky, heading towards the battlefield. With his strength, he immediately destroyed the dome that protected the training camp and began to make his way inside. It was Sela's animal, which stopped near him, and then the guy told Alan to enjoy his last breath. The hero asked the dragon if it was also angry with him, but it rejected his head. Hugh was amazed by what he saw and thought that this was the legendary dragon armor. According to, it is possible to tame a demonic dragon. Then a true spiritual bond is formed between the master and him. Under the influence of emotions, the dragon can change its form and strengthen all of its master's abilities. Right now, in front of everyone, this happened because the hero put on armor, which is called dragon armor. Alan was very surprised and said, "That's impossible. Even if the guy received the dragon's blessing, he would never be able to reach an understanding with it. It seems that this is another illusion, and now he will dispel it with his great curse." Using dark magic and wicked souls, he managed to create a huge, terrifying creature. The hero noticed what helped them understand each other with the dragon and also unite, which was their hatred for Alan. After these words, he made an instant conclusion and immediately cut open the body of the creature, which was supposed to attack him. So right in front of him appeared his opponent, who defended himself only with his staff. Soon the guy started screaming because his arm had been cut off. The hero said it was one arm for stealing their universal talents. The mother began to worry greatly for her son, but her husband told her to calm down. Alan told that this guy was just a bastard, and it was unclear how he dared to do such a thing. But the hero did not listen, and rushed into the attack, saying he was fighting for the shadows who had died because of him, as well as those he had killed in his past life, and from whom he had taken their natural gifts. And also for all the evil he had done in the past, present, and future. Saal prepared for the decisive blow, and said that this man should go straight to hell. As soon as the guy tried to finish off his opponent, something resembling a pearl flew toward his sword. It turned out to be Hera, who had come to protect her son. The chief shouted that he would open because it was a sacred duel, a tradition of their family. Hugh noticed her nobility lady. When she was a magnificent magician, he could not even imagine that he would have the honor of seeing her on the battlefield. To erect a light barrier of 8 circles, she used a magical artifact. The rumor that she lost her magical powers during the murder of the previous leader was true. She used her skill of 9 circles of white magic and the holy spear, saying she knew the boy would become a monster, so he had to be killed as a child. The Duke used his power and immediately shouted so that they would stop immediately. In a few moments, the technician and his wife began to fall apart. Also, after manipulating this power, the main character's armor was also removed from him. Isaac noticed, as expected from the Swordsman of Silence, nothing could overcome his forbidden cry. Brad told Saal that he had no place in the Cooper family, that he should gather his people and leave. The guy replied that he would regret this decision. The women still asked to let him finish him off, but the man shouted, telling him to leave, otherwise he would regret it. In the end, Saal gathered his men and said that they were leaving. So, together with Isaac, they left. The hero said that the gentleman was not obliged to leave with him. Hugh asked if he wanted to join their family. The guy replied that he understood he was an outcast, and wouldn't that be a direct declaration of war on the Cooper family? The man was surprised by this, and the hero continued, saying that he couldn't join their family, but he could offer a deal. The king is ill, and war among the aristocrats is inevitable. If the young man enters the Royal Academy, he will be the first to receive the latest news. Hugh noticed that he is quite calculating whether he wants to get into the academy and for him to help him. Saal thought that since he has a talent for fencing, it's time to use this trump card. So he said the man should help him, as he could become a student of the Silent Saint of the Sword, Chris. The man was drinking and thinking, could someone really remember him? He was a distinguished master of the sword, and speed and agility were his best qualities. The speed of the ball exceeds even the sound of its impact. The blade enters the enemy's body faster than he can even hear as it cuts through the wind. He is carefree on the outside but cautious on the inside, and is the head of the king's personal assassins, so he answers only to him personally. Alcohol is his hobby, but he often pretends. A few days later, Saal asked if the others could see the 3 towers in the distance. It is the protective barrier of Saint Gora, the Holy Trinity, so the city is not far away. Hugh said, I must warn you that even outside the academy, the city is full of other aristocrats, so you should be careful. He continued his speech, and the hero thought that he couldn't be trusted because they were always ready to stab him in the back if it benefited the family. Isaac said not to worry about entering the academy, and that Adelia would become his servant. As for the rest of his subordinates, they would be guards against thieves. Saal thought, could the thieves really be so close? And was this his chance? Hugh said that dealing with them was a real lesson, but the hero shouted to leave it to him. He also noticed that if we're talking about Adelia, she'll be in the way now, and asks Mr. Isaac to accompany her to the Royal Academy. The man sighed and said to his sister that first they needed to settle this young man's people. Very soon, the hero found himself in the thick of the forest, watching the place he needed to find. From her memories of her past life, Angela was supposed to be captured by bandits when she was about 7 years old. The Holy Blade Chris is her father, and he had been searching for his daughter for many years, and was willing to do anything to save her. So if the guy manages to rescue her from captivity, he will have a chance to become his apprentice. As he approaches the bandit's base, he has already put on his armor. A large group was training in the use of spears. Soon, the man who led them noticed a shadow above. Many of his soldiers were killed in a matter of moments. The hero used the first hereditary fencing technique, namely the flash of a bloody shadow. Immediately after that, he applied the second hereditary fencing technique. It was called the Unrestrained Feast of Bloody Snakes, and energy in the form of those very snakes appeared from the weapon. The leader of the bandits, whom Saal was fighting at that moment, was Plan. He became angry when he saw this madman and attacked him. Naturally, the guy noticed this attack and easily blocked the big man's blow. Then he jumped up and used the third hereditary fencing technique, Decapitation of the Bloody Shadow. The gang leader noticed the demon's bloody sword and thought that he was from the Cooper family, but didn't he know who they were? Saal had no intention of listening to him at that moment, and yet he used his technique and cut his neck. A few moments later, when he used his technique, his bloody clones appeared. They, in turn, began to attack the remaining bandits. The hero noticed that they were just a bunch of vicious creatures, and he didn't care who they were. After that, the guy's attention was drawn to a griffin who addressed him. Saal asked what had happened. Had he really found the place he had asked him about? And if that's really the case, then he says, so that he can lead him there, where he needs to go. Soon, the heroes touched the ledge on the wall and opened the door in front of them. Without a moment's hesitation, he began to descend into the place where the girl was hidden. Angela saw him and asked if he had come to rescue her. Saal said that he had come with her to take her to her father and wanted to become his apprentice. He thought that she had said before that she could see people's intentions since childhood. So he analyzed the guy. The girl got up and said that he wasn't lying, so let him lead the way. Then the hero picked her up and began to slowly climb upward. On the way, he said to that he was afraid they wouldn't just let them leave. He said this because a skeleton with a large skull that glowed green appeared before them. The guy said that this big guy was incredibly strong, so he could only block one attack, and when they moved forward, he would distract him and she should run as fast as she could. The hero thought the attack of a 4-meter-tall skeleton was as powerful as a swordmaster's strike, and this one was a full 5 meters tall. He then told the dragon that they were risking their lives and asked Angela to get ready. Of course, the girl agreed, and everyone prepared for the fight. Feeling confident in his success, the guy took a breath and immediately rushed to attack the skeleton. The monster saw him and did not stand aside, so he also rushed into the attack. In the end, the hero only had to hold him back until the girl ran away. Angela started to run away, and the protection faded away at that moment. Smiling in this difficult situation, the guy said that the dragon armor had another ability, and it was time to test its power. So he immediately ordered the armor to be removed. Removing the dragon armor helps to release the accumulated magical powers, and creates a wave of incredible power. It is capable of stunning the enemy and saving a person's life. Saal said that a simple skeleton would not stand in his way. Now all he had to do was take the girl and leave this place together. But the skeleton also noticed how Angela was running away and aimed his magic ball at her, which he released from his mouth. So, a few moments later, there was a powerful explosion at the spot where the man had been standing a moment before. The guy was very worried about her, but a few moments later he saw that the griffin had saved her. However, he soon didn't have enough strength to hold the big girl, and she began to fall. Saal jumped towards her and grabbed her in his arms to save her. He then stated that it was a closed magical formation, and that in order to escape, they had to destroy its core. But for now, this thing is chasing them, so they can't rest easy until they find it. The girl noticed that if he was talking about the core, could she be in a place where no one else was allowed? The boy noticed that maybe she knew such a place. Angela added that when she was released from the dungeon, there were 3 places where it was forbidden to go, one of them not far away, so she should go there. Saal said that although the skeleton is strong, it is quite slow, but at long distances it is capable of throwing equally powerful magic projectiles. And the guy doesn't have any armor right now, so even one projectile could seriously injure him. Upon arriving at the mysterious place, the hero noticed that this room was clearly reinforced, but it wouldn't last long. At the same time, the girl looked at the weapon, namely the bow, and said that it was calling her. Soul stated that if this was the case, then they should look into it. When they got closer to the center, the magical power began to spread to the girl. The hero asked, "Is this really a blessing from the sylphs?" His companion replied that everything was correct, that the big monster would soon be there, and that they should go to the next place. They need a mysterious place, is on the other side. Very soon they arrived there and saw a dark magic ball in the center. Saal was terrified when he saw it and thought, could it be what he thinks it is? It turns out that the wizard who created this skeleton thug ordered him to self-destruct. The guy told Angela that the next move could drive him crazy, and if that happened, he should save himself. The girl replied that everything was fine, and she believed in him. Saal touched the weapon of delirium and thought that he should use the fourth hereditary fencing technique. A few moments later, he rushed towards the skeleton inside and used the bloodbath skill. So the core was struck by several dozen blows and began to crack. At the same time, the spirit of the weapon grabbed the guy and said that he now belonged to it. Chris was in the capital of St. Gore at the Royal Academy. A subordinate came to his master and said that the second prince's soldiers had left the city, so he asked whether to send fighters after them. The man asked, did Sanders really leave the city? If so, we need to keep an eye on his wine, and he will definitely come back for it, as he will personally check everything. The mysterious masked man smiled and said, finally, sir is free, looking at the bottle. At about the same time, the main character was going crazy in the bandits' camp. In fact, he had almost turned into a demon and couldn't control himself, so he attacked everyone around him. Griffin tried to save the girl but couldn't hold her for long, so she was on the ground. The dragon also realized that the situation was bad and tried to protect the guy from it with his power. Saal, with his insane obsession, noticed this attack and turned his attention to it. And the griffin quietly crept closer, trying to protect the girl with all his might. She looked at him intently and then thought about the words the guy had said. She needed to survive by any means necessary, and she thought she shouldn't be afraid because everything would definitely be okay. So she used the bow she had recently received and shot at Saal. Of course, the hero noticed this attack and used his reflexes to defend the forest from her. So the creatures who were under his command had to guard Angela again. The possessed guy laughed and asked what a lovely young apple it was, wondering which part of her to try first. The girl was terrified and realized that she couldn't even move. The hero lifted her up and said that it was such pure blood that he wanted to cut open her chest and let her sprinkle her body. Angela, with tears in her eyes, told her brother not to be upset, that she had done everything she could. Her tears touched the consciousness of the guy, which was sleeping somewhere in the depths of his soul. So he woke up and told the bloody demon not to dare go so far. The creature realized that this was impossible because it could not wake up on its own. Stop resisting because he cannot stop the inevitable because his will is subject to him. Saal regained consciousness and said that it was true, but he only had to do one thing. Then he used the bloodsucker, and the demon said that he would destroy himself, and even if he survived, he would never become a swordsman again. The guy asked not to worry because Chris would soon help him solve this problem, and it was already over for him. Suddenly, a killer from Sanders' squad appeared. He noticed the boy who had caused His Majesty so much trouble. Then he rushed into the attack and shouted that he should die immediately. But to protect the main character, Angela stood in front of him with her own body and asked him not to dare to harm him. The killer felt that something had happened to his hand and that his weapon had been destroyed. As the body continued to disintegrate, Chris told that Angela had endured so much suffering and he apologized. Now he asked her to come to him and they would go home. But the little girl asked, "What about my brother? We can't leave him here." The man turned to him and said that he could help him treat his wounds if he wanted. Saal replied that he wanted much more, because he had risked everything to save Angela and become his heir. Chris told that in the end, he saved her with his own hands. The guy noticed his recklessness, which led to minor complications, but in the end, he managed to snatch the girl from the prince's hands. 7 days later, they were together at the academy. The man informed that he would become his next heir. The hero realized that he was now the academy's #1 enemy. The mentor told that he could renounce his future title at any moment, and the teachers all discussed it. But Saal said that he wanted to achieve much more, and that nothing would stop him. And as soon as he uttered these words, a huge sword appeared before him. This is William, an ordinary student, and he took first place in the combat competition. He said that the guy is a killer of his own kind, so he challenges him to a duel. Saal realized that even all the other enemies around him couldn't suppress such a bloodthirsty aura, so he came up with a plan to take advantage of William's sense of justice. His rival said that if he dared to refuse the duels, he should simply leave Master Chris and renounce his title as his heir. The hero thought that this guy's past life had also been used, so he took out his weapon and accepted William's challenge. But if he lost, he would have to swear allegiance to him until death. Everyone present cheered for their comrade and said to show him the Imperial Academy and that they could be better than the best. Therefore, their participant had no choice but to fight, so he immediately rushed into battle. His opponent used the imperial art of fencing, namely slashing with a lunge, while the other used the fencing technique of the bloody demon, the bloody cut. So he ended up behind this man and said that he should just give up, because he was no match for him. But William used the chi explosion skill, and then the hero realized that this was bad, because he interrupted his attack, and he would only be able to use it again in 10 seconds. Turning around in the air in a few seconds, the guy rushed forward. Fortunately, she managed to return, but realized that this was the strongest technique. Could he have learned while still in the academy? The rival continued his onslaught and told the guy to just give up, and just repent for his deception, and then nothing would happen. Saal smiled, and said that blood magic was very different from other schools of magic. In his current state, the maximum would be a second technique at the level of a silver sword master. Chris said that if he used the third technique, he could become a demon. The hero apologized mentally, but for the sake of William's recognition and loyalty, he was willing to take the risk. The knight said that it was all over and used a slash, but the guy managed to return, and while he was in the air, used the technique of the bloody demon, 1,000 bloody blades. So in reality, this weapon began to gradually approach its opponent. William asked, "Is fencing capable of such a thing?" Saal remarked, he was pleased to see that funny expression on his face again. Suddenly, his mind clouded over again, and that bloody demon appeared. He began to laugh madly, and his opponent realized that something was wrong with this man. Of course, those present immediately became alert and began to assume a fighting stance. The wizards used their power and thought that this scoundrel was using forbidden techniques. With such demonic power, how many innocent people had this guy destroyed? He must be destroyed immediately. This also applies to William. Is he really going to sacrifice his life? The guy said. After losing the duel, he swore allegiance to death itself. So even if he is a bad person, he will defend him to the end. Suddenly, someone entered their room. It was Master Chris, who knocked Saal out with one blow and said that she was as antique as he was in his youth. Students of the Imperial Academy should not act so despicably, arranging duels with wounded people. But he assures that when the guy comes to his senses, they will have as many battles as they want. The students said they were scared, as if he was ready to kill them at any moment. The second heir to the Shavat Moran family asked His Highness what they should do. Sandro Richard, the second prince of the Empire, said he had heard that he had been recommended by a nobleman, so they should go to the main hall, then wondered whether he had really used blood magic, and whether this was a good way to kill himself. 1060. Adelia told the teacher that she would like to help Saal Cassidon, asked her not to be silly because he is a blood mage. The girl noticed that he had said that the School of Magic has no influence. The teacher noted that it was all true. A person's character has nothing to do with the School of Magic, but his magic is terrible and completely different from ordinary blood magic. Chris said that if he wanted to master this art using blood magic, he had to be in perfect condition, both physically and psychologically. For 7 days, the man worked tirelessly to help his body recover. He would teach him how to use the power of his own blood instead of Kai to strengthen his body and use bloody fencing. And he thanked him by getting into a fight before recovering if he really wants to destroy himself. Then who will repay the Coopers? The guy said that he wasn't stupid enough to do that. Besides, he trusts his teacher and knows that he won't let his student and heir go crazy. Suddenly, the dean of the Academy's combat faculty, George Brandon Chris, appeared and asked what he was doing here since he was not welcome. The man noted that he was actually outside the door. He said that Saal was a recommended student of the Academy, and according to the rules, he had 1 week to complete the tests to prove that he was worthy of training. And Chris should not let whims interfere with the work of the Academy. The rector can and will tolerate this, but he will not. The hero asked the teacher, "Are there any problems?" Chris noticed that this was the case. He's just a stubborn old man. As long as the guy doesn't break the rules, there's no need to worry too much. Then the hero realized that he should complete the tests as soon as possible. At night, Richard told old George that, as a test, he had prepared another dungeon for Saal, instructing his subordinate to poison the water in it before Cooper's arrival. He will go so mad that Chris will simply have no choice but to kill him. The next day, the hero told William that they would talk after receiving the assignment. The subordinate replied that his next test would be too difficult. Saal said that he knew that they were making the task more difficult for him. The guy did not answer that this was not the case. Now the situation at the Academy is quite complicated. This is because everyone has gathered in the main hall and is waiting for him to arrive. Philip, the student on duty and George's student, was there. Adelia was also among those present. The hero approached the registration desk and said that he wanted to take part in the trial test. He was asked to give his name and faculty, and he did so. Philip apologized and said that changes had been made to his dungeons, increasing their difficulty to extreme and requiring a minimum of 4 people. William was indignant, but in response he heard that the trials for individuals would only be ready next week, but the trials had to be completed within 3 days. Turning to Saal, she asked if he wanted to try to find people for the group or calmly leave their academy safe and sound. Many were outraged at that moment, but Saal said he just thought he wouldn't be able to find a team. Philip replied that he didn't care, and the others didn't want to join his team. And even more so, they didn't want to be his lapdogs like William. The hero insisted on giving him a weapon, said that if he could find a teammate, he would kneel down and ask William for forgiveness for such an insult. George's assistant replied, "Don't even dream about it, because if you want to bow down before you, you'll have to kill him." Saal replied that he would simply tell the truth to teacher Chris. Philip continued to insist that he assemble the team by evening, but the hero replied that there was no need to do so. Then Gloria happened to Delia, and William, the hero, said to the cross-eyed gentleman that he should register their team, and after that, he would be so kind as to kneel down and ask for forgiveness. He wanted to make his life difficult, but were they ready to risk their vacation for this? Philip was angry, and the student said that he was just following the rules, but this guy took advantage of Mr. Chris's good name. William said there was no need to go that far. The guy asked them to remember, as long as they didn't make a mistake, no one could stand in their way. Philip told the teacher that he wanted to finish him off. George said not to forget about propriety and the rules of the academy. Everything he experienced today was fuel for his strength. And soon the main character's group was heading into the jungles of Melissa. William said, "According to legend, the legacy of a powerful sorceress is hidden here. However, the Academy has owned this dungeon for several hundred years, but none of the students have been able to find the legacy. The exit is located at the lake. The foot of the mountain is a dangerous place inhabited by nightmarish monsters. Near the top, on the contrary, there are low-level monsters. The fog is poisonous, and the master of the Golden Ball can hold out for about 10 hours. Depending on the indicator of his own war, he can only hold out in battle for 6 hours." Suddenly, the hero said to get ready because someone was approaching them. It was a group of students who were running away from bugs and asking for help. William told that it was a swarm, not extremely resilient, but killing them would not help. It would be better to hold out until they went away. An unfamiliar girl replied to that it was useless. They had been running for 20 minutes and had changed direction several times. At the same time, Adelia used her power and a shield appeared near her team. William said it's a cat's purr. "I don't understand what kind of spell is that." Saal told that these people ran for 20 minutes and didn't even have the courage to pick up a sword, yet they dare to call themselves talented warriors. And at that moment, he used a technique called the Bloody Snake. His power struck the beetles in a few moments, so they all fell lifeless to the ground. The guy asked, "Don't they get stronger then? What kind of vile and useless monster is this?" The second squad rejoiced that they were finally saved. The hero asked, "Aren't you ashamed that your rivals saved you?" The girl called him a savage because how could any nobleman consider him anything but a pitiful bastard, his rival? If he had been smart enough to offer to walk them to the exit, she might have asked him to be her servant. Suddenly, she was very frightened by the sounds and asked what else it was. The swarm must have attracted the attention of other monsters. Everyone should be careful with these monsters. It's not that simple. As soon as the guy said that, a huge monster appeared, looking like a bear. Saal said with a smile on his face that none of this mattered, and that they wouldn't just kill them all. The art of bloody fencing is a special style based more on the use of blood magic and passed down in the Cooper family from generation to generation. Because this style uses magical power, the physical movements during combat become very sharp and unpredictable, making it impossible to counter. The hero used the bone spike skill, namely the slaughter, on the beast to become stronger. As a warrior, during physical training, only one thing is needed, and that is to kill. The hero needs to carefully control his blood and also use it, and then absorb it to improve his blood, and that is the essence of blood magic. A simple blood mage cannot develop his abilities so quickly in battle, and because of his fragile body, but a bloody fencer is unlimited in this regard. The power of spilled blood is not important, because every drop will only make the owner of this style stronger. The only problem with this style is that all the malice and hatred accumulated in the collected blood does not disappear, but rather merges. This is the image of the immortal demon within the warrior himself. It is an eternal, unbreakable curse. Only a truly outstanding soul is capable of suppressing it. Adelia asked after using it if everything was okay with him. The hero asked her not to worry. Thanks to his teacher's teachings, even high-level monsters are not a problem. Therefore, to strike the creatures, he used his skill and applied a storm as well as a whirlwind of arrows. In order to prevent his allies from being injured, the mage used a star shield. Gloria asked if something was wrong with him, that he couldn't be a dragon. His companion replied, "That's not true, because the sensations are completely different." Another noticed that anyone who uses blood magic is doomed to lose their mind. The first and second Coopers went mad because of this magic. They also say the same about the current head. The mage used starlight to bind them. The girl replied that using such a spell is extremely dangerous for us madmen. After a while, the alley moved into another consciousness, and was struck by the fact that it was Sal's inner world. Behind her was a bloody demon who said it turns out there are still people willing to risk their lives to save the heroine, asked what he had done to the guy. The monster replied that he had done nothing, the boy had chosen this path himself. The progenitor of the Cooper family, who had created him, had just died from this thing. The creature asked about a deal. He would tell how to save him, and in return, she would allow him to plant the seed of a blood demon in her heart. Adelia replied that she agreed. The demon began to laugh and asked why good people are always so stupid. At that moment, the girl was only thinking that she would save the guy at any cost. The starlight was supposed to purify him, and it was the technique of the star stream. The aristocrat said that at a young age she was already capable of using a 7th level spell. How much time did she spend with books? That's very interesting. Gloria turned to the lady and said that she should either come over and help them or shut her mouth. The hero was trying to deal with the demon that was trying to control his body. The bloody friend laughed and said that a little girl had saved him again, and what a loser he was. If he hadn't promised that girl to save him, he wouldn't even have thought of showing up in such a dirty place. Right now, he'll show him just once, so let him remember it well. The guy, in turn, needs to learn to understand the blood he has absorbed to find out what flow determines his control over himself and get rid of it. If he allows that trash to take over his body again, he will kill that girl he likes. As he said goodbye, he told that they would meet again very soon. In response, the hero declared that next time he would regret their meeting. Immediately after saying this, he used a skill called Feather Snakes and struck all the creatures with a single blow. Immediately after this action, the blood of all the defeated enemies began to rise to the crystal. At the highest point of the mountain, a bright beam appeared. The aristocrat said, "A master of demigod level has arrived. This means that the academy learned that they were in trouble and sent a teacher." Saal asked why they disturbed a master of such caliber. Surely something serious had happened. But in any case, it didn't matter because he had to finish the tests. High monsters gathered in huge numbers at the highest point, and a man arrived there. And in a few moments they were amazed. The man told that this bunch of animals didn't even know what they were doing. All that remained was to return with the bastard's head, and then His Highness Sandra would be in his debt. The man's name was Oliver, and he was a master swordsman. He thought that with the help of this artifact, a specially developed faculty of magic for detecting blood, he would easily be able to find the boy and finish him off. Suddenly, he heard William being asked if he knew why there was a demigod level. Had they really invented it to sound pretentious? Oliver saw the squad and thought, did he really save these guys on his way here? Unless the other students can't deal with him directly? The students saw him and asked happily, "Did you come here to pick them up?" They are already grateful. The teacher thought, there's nothing to be done, because everyone loves him. Get rid of the villain, who caused the anomaly in the dungeon, then they will thank him for it. At that moment, the main character saw that his opponent had drawn his weapon and was attacking. The sword immediately pierced his body, and a pool of blood appeared there. Oliver said this child must be happy that he was honored to die by him. Saal noticed that means the level of a demigod is the level of a golden sword master. They are all from the academy after all. It sounds impressive, but in reality it's nothing. The man was surprised that he didn't die, and that this is the ability of my blood. So the hero thought the image of a bloody demon taught him to find any poison in the bloodstream. Now he used something else, instead of the flow of toxins. Therefore, he manifested its movement throughout his body, and this facilitated movement. The guy sees how the force flows through his body and thus can predict movement. If he can fully master this technique, in the future he will even be able to copy the movements and techniques of other people. At that moment, the mage from the squad used a cat's purr to create a barrier. But William rushed into the attack using an imperial slash, so the teacher could only defend himself. He realized that this guy was really hard to kill, and William was fighting with all his might, so it seemed that he would have to use this after all. The man used his fighting technique and predicted the space with the help of the flow. Then he moved from the place where he had just been. The result was a huge monster with large, long heads. Oliver thought that the students would be grateful for the unusual practical experience he had arranged for them. They tried to fight off the monsters and said that he wanted to kill them. Although it was strange, he used a teleportation scroll to escape. One of the guys was scared and said that he didn't want to die. He wanted to earn some more money, become successful, and start a family. Another student was also crying, but he understood that he had to fight with all his might. But when the monsters saw their victims, they immediately rushed to attack and wanted to tear them to pieces. The hero told his friend to block the monsters' attacks, and he agreed. But Adelia Gloria was ordered to protect these losers because they were their witnesses. The sorceress used her barrier. Duchess Isaac said that she would become more powerful if she stopped giving her such names. The hero asked for the crystal because they would die and fail the tests anyway. He understood that this was a monster of catastrophic proportions. I'm sure that if he uses the Shadow Bloodblade technique, the demon will be able to take control of his body. But what if he only uses skills below silver? In the end, told William to distract him because the guy needed a little time. The subordinate immediately rushed into the attack and blocked the attack of the huge monster. But the creature's strength was so great that it was easily thrown back several dozen meters. As a result, the monster rushed at Saal, who was standing nearby. To protect him, William reappeared and used imperial fencing and his tearing skill. During the battle, he asked how much time the hero still needed to collect blood. Several powerful attacks flew in his direction, and he told that there were only a few seconds left. To protect him from these attacks, Gloria arrived and used her sword dance. But suddenly something happened to her, and she immediately fell to the ground. Fortunately for her, the main character used his blood magic and managed to catch her. He was already fully prepared for battle and told the monster that its end had come. So he immediately rushed into the attack and used the skill of striking with bloody flames. The truly enormous heads of the monsters of catastrophic level were cut off by this. When Saal saw what had happened, he thought, has he finally perished? After the battle, the hero gradually began to approach his comrades in arms. Suddenly, one of the knights who had also been wounded stood up. He began to say that Saal was a demon who used blood magic, as well as a bastard who betrayed his family, and that the villains were ready to kill their comrades. After saying this, he shouted loudly and immediately thrust his sword into the ground. He then named his classmate and said, if it weren't for his help, he would already be dead. Therefore, he asked for his sincere apologies to be accepted, and for his past foolishness to be forgiven. All the other students also knelt down and asked for their apologies and gratitude to be accepted. Suddenly, the girl interrupted them and told them to look at what was there. A huge swarm of vicious insects appeared in the sky and headed towards them. Saal used his blood vision skill because he understood that there was clearly some mystery behind this swarm. Soon, he used a crimson flash and told Adelia to protect herself and these people, so that they would be taken care of. The hero headed for the water, which was directly below the swarm, and began to dive down. He understood that it was nothing more than a simple tool for gathering life forces. Their true purpose was to resurrect the sorceress Melissa. Black magic again, and that scoundrel was ready to take everything from others just to survive. so he used the blood demon and told him to feast. As a result, the life force that was taken from the students at the beginning began to return. On top of all this, a door opened, which was the gate from the dungeon. The hero thought that he had never even dreamed that he would find a way out. Oliver understood that all this must remain a secret because otherwise, not only His Highness's plan to unite the Academy would suffer, but he himself would too. The portal in the dungeon opened, but who managed to survive this time? The man has no right to make mistakes, and he will leave no one alive. The other students rejoiced that the gates were opening and that they would soon be able to get out of there. Adelia asked if everything was okay with Saal. He said that everything was fine and that his physical and magical powers had been restored. He also found a couple of things at the bottom of the lake. The girl said that the bottle smelled like poison. It's not often you see crystal bottles, and when she gets back to the academy, she'll ask her teacher about it. William noticed, judging by its size, it was a magical crystal of catastrophic power. It was a pity that they had to sacrifice the past and could no longer stay in the icy fog. When Charlie approached and said that they should take this crystal that he managed to collect during his own trial, the others said he should take their crystals too. Finally, they accepted Sella, and it was great. Soon, his students were heading for the gates which opened nearby. Suddenly, Oliver appeared and asked why they couldn't just die in the dungeon. He instantly attacked the main character, and the latter took advantage of the bloody flash. The girls from the squad were worried about him and said they were coming to help. Saal used his bloody vision and told Oliver that this time he would definitely finish him off. The teacher rushed towards him and said that he was poisonous and a scoundrel. Then they clashed with each other in a deadly fight, and after that, the man and the boy moved away from each other. When the hero landed, he dropped a vial containing poison. A few moments later, the dean appeared and ordered everyone to stop immediately. Then she asked what Oliver was doing. Thought that he was a brainless fool who broke the rules to fulfill the mission of the second prince. A bunch of students are worthless. The man said that he had come here to eliminate the person who had poisoned the dungeon. Everyone was surprised, and the girl asked if there was any evidence. In response, George showed a scroll created personally by the rector of the academy. It detects the smell of poison, and if there is someone among them who used the poison, the scroll will find him. So the magic beam rushed towards the vial of poison. The students wondered if it was Saal, but he had saved them. Discord and distrust arose again towards the main character for poisoning them. George thought that this bunch of pathetic scum was so easy to deceive, that it was easy to take advantage of those who were destined to be mere pawns. Then he asked the hero if he had anything to say, and he replied, if they want to accuse someone of something, they will always find a reason. Then he grabbed the river, and noticed that if he thinks that the guy will give up, then that's a dream. George realized that he is fast, and that is the power of his sword. So he grabbed his weapon and said that according to the rules, a teacher can kill anyone who attacks him within the walls of the academy, and now Chris's student would be punished. Suddenly, some other force that appeared from outside affected his blade. Several men entered the portal, and one of them told George to wait, because the time for execution had not yet come. The teacher told the director to look at this magic scroll, and he found traces of damage on Saal. The man used a secret identification technique. It was a secret royal poison. So he said that this did not prove anything, and that they should first put them in prison and then start an investigation. It is better to lock them up for a while, otherwise this guy will be overwhelmed by an unstoppable stream of attempts on his life. The director said that they should go back because there was no point in the students wasting their time on such trifles. The students discussed it again, and they didn't understand whether Saal had really poisoned herself or not. Some said that he was guilty, while others said that he wasn't. Soon, the main character and Chris found themselves in a dungeon. The master said that this poison was a special weapon of the royal family against blood mages. According to what he managed to find out, it was obtained by Prince Sandro. The hero shouted that he would not let him get away and would kill him. The teacher told him to stay there and think about how many enemies he had killed in this world, but there would be no fewer of them. Oliver remarked that he was stupid. After all, Chris's job is to protect the royal family. The hero replied that he still didn't understand anything. Will develop with his prince. The interlocutor noted that it was a great honor for him to contribute to His Highness's plan. The main character immediately remembered his past life and thought that this was absolute devotion. He then asked me whether the man was worth it. Is he spending his energy to satisfy someone else? Or does he himself want to be treated like expendable material, whose life can be sold at any moment? Does he really not care about anything else? If he confesses to Director Albus that he built the dungeon, will the guy be able to help him get rid of the prince's influence? Oliver shouted to cover him. Does he really want to turn him into the same rabid beast who betrayed his family? Saal replied that he can't wait to see what they do to him. After a while, someone came to this man. He said that His Highness had arranged a duel between him and Saal in the Colosseum, and that this was his last chance. This precious vial of the Vine of Life would give him a glorious end. The man replied that he would carry out His Highness's order at the cost of his life. His companion said, "Good, she understands and is appreciated." Oliver noticed that after taking the Vine of Life, he would die, so what good would fame do him after death? In the end, it was unclear whether fame was really that important, and whether it was worth sacrificing one's own life for it. Very soon, the time came when the battle was to take place in the Imperial Colosseum. The main character and his opponent were already preparing for the upcoming duel. It was announced that today's duel would be held according to the good old customs. Two warriors would clash with each other under the attack of a beast. Whether it be the killing of their opponent or a joint victory over the great beast, the brave men who remain alive will receive a reward and congratulations from His Highness. Oliver rushed into the attack and saw how he wielded his bloody weapon. If the damage area is large enough, that luxury of turning into blood will not help him. After that, they collided with each other, and the opponent was thrown back. Saal asked if he knew how strong a swordsman with S-class talent was, who had been training diligently since the age of 4. After that, he rushed into the attack, but the beast was also behind him and tried to do the same. The hero used the silent blade, namely the rumble, and decided when he was fully recovered that could do it. The prince did not understand why Oliver had not yet used the potion. He then said for someone to bring Grace here. Oliver's mother and the second prince's cook arrived at that moment. The boy saw his own mother, and realized that if he lost, something would happen to her. So he used the bottle because he understood that he had the right to lose. His strength began to grow rapidly, and he seemed to be mad. Monsters attacked him, but the teacher rushed into battle and asked to die for his mother's sake. He quietly asked to save his mother from the hands of the second prince, and in return, he would help him kill the beast. The hero asked what he was going to do. In response, Oliver pushed him away and said, "Only if he dies will his mother be able to see tomorrow." The boy's body was rapidly approaching the monster that was trying to attack. The opponent walked up to him and said, "I'm going to use the harvesting technique in their flaming blade." So very soon, the creature, namely the monster, was struck by this attack. His mother was very frightened for her son, but the prince noticed that it was a waste of time and energy, because he couldn't even handle such a small matter. Oliver hoped that his death would appease His Highness's anger, and that Saal would see that he had paid for his sins and also saved his mother. Very soon, the core of hellish life was used. Oliver begged to save his mother, and the hero asked if he had worked for the second prince for her sake. If he died, the guy wouldn't help him save anyone. So right now, let him take care of his family himself. The hero pierced him with his sword and used the magic of blood rebirth of blood and flesh. The blood of the hell vine can neutralize the negative effects of the vine of life. One should not talk too much and restore strength, because Chris will come for him. The prince said that he never imagined that the magic of blood was so powerful that he could defeat both the beast and the demigod swordsman at the same time. So he offered his congratulations, and now the victor could ask him for a reward. He would choose wealth or beg for forgiveness for his evil deeds. Pointing to the woman next to him, the hero said that he only wanted her. The prince declared that he probably wanted to take revenge on Oliver's family. Of course, one could say that Saal is truly a real blood mage. Greed, a thirst for blood, and a desire to kill have completely consumed his soul, so maybe he can join him, because he will become his faithful sharp blade. The hero asked, "Is his attitude toward his servants really so inconsistent?" Oliver gave his life for him and died while carrying out an order, after which his family immediately kicked him out into the cold. His Highness said that he was sorry he died. Saal asked what if he didn't want to join him, heard this, and said that if that was the case, blood mages were persecuted in their empire, and only those in power could protect him, so he should join or be expelled. The subordinate rushed at the guy and asked, "How dare you refuse His Majesty's order?" The hero easily defended himself from this attack with one hand. Soon, they shouted that there was a murderer here, and that His Majesty must be protected at all costs. Oliver returned to his mother, and she was happy to see him. The prince did not understand how this cowardly man could still be alive. Let him go to hell. The hero struck one of the knights and said, "Only he will go here." Immediately after that, he continued his battle and used a bloody flash. So in a few moments, the weapon was near the prince. Saal said that he could see that his life was now useless, and so was his power. The prince turned to Chris and said, "As the head of the royal guard, he is also the supreme assassin of the royal family. So is he also a traitor?" The man rushed forward and killed one of the knights who was nearby. He then hid his weapon and declared that His Majesty alone had 3 vials of royal poison that had been found in Melissa's dungeon. As the head of the royal guard, he had to find out where they came from. He thought it was good that Saal had saved his daughter, otherwise they could have been manipulated. The prince realized that if the investigation continued, they would get to him and put him under house arrest. Soon there would be a meeting to exchange new academy students. His older brother is definitely after him, so he has this opportunity. Then the guy said that these bottles were a gift, and how Oliver got them is unclear. The hero asked if he meant to say that it was all Moran's plan. The man replied that he had nothing to do with it, and that they should call Moran here. Soon the man arrived and asked if His Majesty had summoned him. When he arrived at the blood-stained spot, she immediately rushed at him to attack. But suddenly a shield appeared that protected him. The guy said that he wondered who would have the courage to attack a nobleman in broad daylight, and it turned out to be a bastard. The man who arrived turned out to be Alan and said, "According to the sacred laws of the Empire, Moran is a baron, and that means even if the guy kills him, he will only have to apologize to the Cooper family and pay them compensation in gold. So he is still alive, and being a raven, Moran did not violate any laws of the Empire." His Majesty then greeted him and apologized for the young man. The prince replied that such a rabid dog should be kept behind bars. He stated that he hadn't seen this bastard in a long time, so it would be interesting to see if he was ready to return to his cage. The mentor told the guy that he surprised him with his reaction today. He was talking about the guy from the Cooper family who had been bad-mouthing him in front of the others. The man was disgusted to hear this, but he wasn't even angry. The The hero asked why he should be angry, since he had already dealt with him. But that guy is protected by the cursed moment of shadows, so he won't die, and only those who are not from the Cooper family will suffer. Alan's mother would not leave her son alone, and believes that she is here with the head of the family too. In addition to all this, the second prince, Sandra, was tasked with holding a meeting to exchange new students at the academy. He invited all the heads of families. Several knights attacked Saal, asking him not to fool Chris, but the guy reacted calmly to this. He defended himself with his weapon and said that there would be many high-level knights at the exchange meeting, and they would also want to fight him. While talking, he destroyed his opponents with his enormous strength. The mentor smiled and said that it was good. He had clearly matured. The man had recently arranged a meeting with the director. He was extremely interested in his magic and wanted to study it in more detail, so something good might come of it. Soon, the director met with the young man and asked him to use his strong techniques. The hero objected, but the old man noticed. If he doesn't respect him, then he will start first. And his magic really did start its attack very soon. Saal was surprised and thought, how did he calculate the spell without words? Luckily, he defended himself with his blood magic. This blow was comparable to the attack of a swordmaster. Albus's training dummy was used. The director noticed that he was not in the best shape, but he could still handle the golden ball master. Rushing into the attack, the hero immediately used the fourth technique of bloody fencing called the Bloody Storm. The old man said, the swing is not bad, but the effectiveness is lacking, so you should try to increase your strength with your own blood. As a result, the guy tried to do it by carrying out his instant attack. Albus noticed that he was getting too carried away, and that the blood demon would not miss the opportunity. It feeds on the life force of other beings, and sitting down only strengthens it. The guy constantly used high-level techniques, burning a lot of the creature's blood, even in his consciousness, and that voice was exactly like Brad Cooper's. Chris shouted to the director that he couldn't continue to watch, that the guy wouldn't be able to take it. The hero asked not to worry because he had the strength. The man replied that in order to protect the guy from the demon, you need to catch the right moment and lock the monster in chains. He forbade Saal from using blood magic until he learned to control the demon. Saal said that the exchange meeting would begin soon, and he would not be able to use his tricks. The mentor noted that he needed to master it as soon as possible, and that the essence of blood was control and manipulation. The old man added that he was just used to relying on bloody fencing. The spirit said that the troops entrusted by the first and second generations of the Cooper Lords were invincible, but then, they all died in one night. However, the only interesting thing is what happened. The hero thought, could it be that the master of bloody fencing flew into a rage, which would explain why there is no mention of this event in the books? Albus said that they study at their academy, and have many friends whom he must take care of, so if he does not want them to die by his hand, he must learn to control the demon. Saal said that he understood everything and thanked his mentor, who suggested that he go and begin special training. In the end, the fewer people who know about this secret training, the better. Chris thought how many birds there were in this forest, and soon the academy would become lively. The raven that had been there all along turned out to be a woman. Upon arrival, she changed her appearance and said that it was just a healing bath. This drunken lord did it on purpose, and everything went wrong. The girl's name is Luna Forest, and she's a highly talented student.